Chapter 73. By the time they changed their clothes, the sun had not set. Lao Dao sat by the stone table, drinking cup after cup of tea. In fact, he didn't have lunch at noon. He had been drinking tea since morning. In the words of the old Taoist, this Baohua gathering was a grand gathering that has never been seen in the city of Wei. The great painter from the capital, the only son of a noble family that had been favored for generations, had come here to attend the gathering. How could he lose face for a noble family? He wouldn't even eat at the Munanju's main restaurant. He must have booked the best table at Cheonghua Building. One table cost 50 taels of silver. He, old Taoist Liu, had never eaten at a banquet that cost 50 taels of silver. No matter what this time, he must eat to his heart's content. Li Yunxin found it funny to see him like this, but it was understandable. He ordered some food and wine from the Munanju at the corner of the street, and ate slowly on the stone table. He didn't like drinking before, but after he came to this world he liked it. But he didn't like hard liquor. He only liked the Munan Chun of the Munanju. According to the taste, it was about 10 degrees. It had the fragrance of fresh fruits and grains. He drank 1 or 2 cups each time to soothe his nerves, because he was too tired recently. Although he was staying in the courtyard, his thoughts, apart from sleeping, hadn't stopped for a moment. He was trying to make an important decision. This decision was against his original intention of coming to the city of Wei. But the situation was different, because he realized that the 9th young master had other secrets besides the identity of the 9th son of Qi Wen. And he met Ling Kongzi at the Qiao family yesterday. Li Yunxin felt that he had a dark mind, so it was hard for him to believe in coincidences. When the Daotong cultivator Ling Kongzi met him, he knew that he was not immortal. If he didn't solve this problem, his identity would not be safe. But thinking about it further, his identity was only to save his life. But there were many other ways to save his life. He was trying to avoid a bad result and get a good one. However, there were many times when the success or failure of a matter depended on luck in addition to strategy. It was precisely because he knew this that he had planned for the worst from the very beginning, to use Li Yaoxi and the Qiao family members as experimental subjects to verify a certain method. Now that the method was proven to be effective, it was time for him to start planning for his future. He had been living peacefully for more than 10 years, but he was suddenly being hunted down. Then, one after another, he would be surrounded by capricious fellows who might harbor ill intentions towards him. It was said that pressure was the motivation to move forward, but he did not want this kind of pressure at all. Compared to carefully observing other people's expressions for survival, and praying that he would not be eaten, he wished even more that he was the villain. Tonight would probably be the first act of the upcoming drama. He had to achieve his first goal. Night fell and the lanterns were lit. Just as Lu Laodao had said, the venue tonight was Cheonghua Building. Since it dared to use such a name, and was really famous in the city of Wei, Cheonghua Building couldn't just be described as magnificent. Therefore, when Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao walked for nearly an hour to the outside of this building, he was very surprised. He used to live in a mountain village, and then in the wilderness. He came to the city of Wei, and lived in Lu Laodao's Dragon King Temple. So he rarely came to such a prosperous place. Therefore, his general impression of the buildings of this era was beautiful and ancient, but limited by the technical conditions, he could only make the ancients sigh, but not himself. But at the first sight of this building, Li Yunxin knew that he had underestimated this world. There were almost no walls on every floor of this Cheonghua building. Every floor was like an enlarged version of a pavilion, with a 360-degree panoramic view, supported only by the vermilion wooden pillars painted with gilded patterns of flowers and birds. Just looking at the first floor, it could easily fit 3 Munanju stores. Then the floors slightly shrunk to the 6th floor, which was covered with a gilded roof. At this time, thick candles were lit on the roof and by the windows, illuminating the whole Cheonghua building under the night sky. It really looked like a pagoda in the hands of a divine immortal. There was a lot of traffic downstairs. At a glance, all kinds of luxurious carriages and horses gathered on the street, and manservants in all kinds of clothes were running back and forth. There were high-ranking officials and nobles dressed in silk and satins, women and young ladies escorted by their servants, walking towards the main entrance. There were also well-dressed guards looking around with bright eyes. After he came to the city of Wei, he knew that the clothes of ordinary people were not special, and could only be described as rich. But at this time, seeing the scene in front of Qionghua Building, even a person like him felt dazzling and gorgeous. This should be the upper class of the city of Wei. He and Lu Laodao turned out of a small alley. As soon as they came out of the alley, they saw such a scene, and only felt a wave of noise hit them in the face. Lu Laodao was a little absent-minded, and couldn't help but stop. But Li Yunqin didn't like this kind of noise. At this time, the street was only paved with green stone slabs, and there was yellow soil on both sides. It hadn't rained for many days, and it had long been dry. On the street, there were not only people and servants attending the meeting, but also people from the city who came to see the scene. When there were more people, the shouting, hawking, and crying of children mixed together. There were also some leftover melons and fruit pits, and dirty water from an unknown source, all over the ground. It was very noisy and dirty. The two of them walked out of the alleyway. Unlike the officials and wealthy merchants who had carriages and horses to clear the way on the stone streets, they only paused for a moment at the entrance of the alleyway. Their brand new shoes and clothes were already covered in a thin layer of dust. He sighed and pulled the corner of Lao Dao's clothes. He wanted to walk out from the crowd, cross the street, and enter Qionghua Building. But after a while Lao Dao didn't move. "What's wrong?" he asked. Lu Laodao looked at his Taoist robe, and then at Qionghua Building, and the people in fancy clothes and horses in front of the building. His previous energetic expression was gone, and now he seemed to be a little timid. He raised his hand, as if he wanted to wipe his forehead with his sleeve, but looked at the people on both sides and put it down. "Brother Xian." Lu Laodao hesitated for a while, and then said, "How about I don't go?" Seeing him like this, Li Yunqin didn't say anything. He looked at Lu Laodao, and stayed silent for a short while. Of course, it was only for a short while. Because of the appearance of this Lao Dao, and the scene today, it overlapped with a certain scene, and a certain person in his memory. Although it was only for a very short moment. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Lao Dao thought that he was angry with him, and hurriedly said, "Alas, Brother Xian Lao Dao, I am actually alas." But before he could finish his words, Li Yunqin suddenly smiled. Seeing his smile, Lu Laodao didn't know why he felt that it was not right. He had seen Li Yunqin smile before, but most of them were disdainful, mysterious, cruel, and absent-minded. But at this moment this smile Lu Laodao felt, in this dark and noisy alley, the smile on his face was indeed very warm. Then he heard Li Yunqin say, "It's nothing. I'm here." He didn't know whether it was because it was too noisy, or because he was too nervous. Lu Laodao also thought that he saw Brother Xian's lips move slightly and quickly after saying this. And then he spit out a word. His eyes seemed to see through him in a moment, looking at other places or people. That word seemed to be Grandpa. Chapter 74. But at least, Li Yunqin's smile made him feel at ease. In the 50 or 60 years of Lu Laodao's life, very few people showed him such a smile, and said such words to him. Today he looked at the young man he picked up from the roadside and suddenly realized, he was no longer alone. He was no longer the one who took care of the Dragon King temple, walked the streets and watched people's faces, was happy for a few days after he sold a few paintings, went to bed early at night, and woke up the next morning in a daze in the vestibule. If he was no longer alone, then the other person didn't care about how he looked in other people's eyes. What did he care about? It had been so many years. The fear that Lu Laodao felt when he saw the luxurious and prosperous scene in front of the building suddenly disappeared. He laughed mischievously. "Okay, I have you, Brother Xian. Let's go," Li Yunqin said with a smile. "You've been hungry all day." The two of them squeezed out of the crowd, and joined the bustling scene in front of the building. But after walking 2 or 3 steps to the side of the street, Lu Laodao suddenly stopped again. Li Yunqin thought that he still felt ashamed and frowned slightly. He felt that he had to spend a few minutes to carry out a psychological intervention on him. This was a piece of cake for him. especially for someone like Lu Laodao who trusted him. It was not impossible for a professional, especially a professional among professionals like him, to use a few minutes to build a temporary and solid psychological defense for a person who was originally not wary of him in a relatively short period of time. But he had never thought of doing this before. He felt that he probably preferred the original old man, because it was very interesting. But just as he was about to speak, the old man had already turned to the right and said in a clear voice, "Fellow Taoist, sure. See you here. How have you been?" Li Yunxin looked to the right and raised his eyebrows. Lu Laodao's voice and tone were only used when speaking to believers who came to offer incense in the hall. His pronunciation was perfect, and there was a hint of clarity in his deep voice. It was rare for someone of his age. However, in these 3 sentences, there was an imperceptible tremor and rise at the end of each sentence. "I'm very excited right now." But he was excited because of some strong positive emotion. When Li Yunxin saw fellow Taoist Sure again, he faintly smiled in his heart. Ha! Sunset glow was the most beautiful. Fellow Taoist Sure is a woman. He was about 40 or 50 years old. When the women in this world reached the age of 40 or 50, most of them looked like the 60 or 70 years old women in his world. However, this fellow Taoist Sure actually seemed a little. Her charm was still there. It was probably because even though it was an unorthodox cultivation method, it was more or less effective. She was also wearing a green Taoist robe and had her hair combed into a bun. There were wrinkles on his face, but they were not unpleasant. His skin was smooth, and he looked a bit like a treasure. At first glance, he looked like a Taoist with some cultivation. Standing together with Lu Laodao, people in the secular world would really feel that he was refined and had the demeanor of an expert cultivator. When this fellow Taoist Sure saw the old man, she was slightly stunned at first, and then her eyes narrowed happily. She returned the greeting, "Lu Laodao, nice to meet you too." The tone and voice of these 2 sentences made Li Yunxin have a good impression of her. Although the woman was old, she seemed to be a cheerful and lively person. In this world at her age, this was very rare. Laodao hurriedly said, Good. Fellow Taoist Sure is also coming to the Baohua gathering?" "That's right." That fellow Taoist Sure was still smiling with her eyes narrowed. "I thought such a grand gathering had nothing to do with us small temples. Who knew that they really sent an invitation?" The person who sent the invitation said that it was the intention of the first disciple of the Langye cave, Taoist Ling Kongzi. "Last night, I received the invitation and set off immediately. I hurried over and only just arrived now." Lu Laodao blinked. "Ah," fellow Taoist Sure said. "It said that Taoist Ling Kongzi has something to say at the gathering." The invitation was very polite, saying that he wants the cultivators near the city of Wei to work together. In fact, I think he probably wants to send us some things to do. People like us can't be considered cultivators. It's that expert who is being too polite. Lao Dao responded twice, and was silent for a short while. Li Yunxin knew that this was the old man's awkward silence. He smiled slightly, and went forward to greet Taoist Sure, saying, "Greetings, senior." The woman had been looking at Li Yunxin before. Now that she heard him speak, she smiled even more happily. "Oh, Lao Dao, is this your disciple? He's so handsome." Lao Dao hurriedly said, "Oh, this is. I'm Yin Xinzi." Li Yunxin knew that Lao Dao was embarrassed and said with a smile, "He's my master's new disciple." "Greetings, senior." Lu Lao Dao gave him a grateful look. If Li Yunxin didn't say it, he really didn't know whether he should say, "This is my disciple." At this time, he hurriedly introduced, "Disciple, this is the temple attendant of the mountain god temple in Daga Mountain, 20 miles away from the city of Wei, Taoist Shirquizi. She's my old friend." Li Yunxin bowed again, and Shirquizi bowed back. Lu Laodao stepped aside, and the two walked side by side into the Chonghua building. The old man seemed a little uncomfortable at this time, and Li Yunxin also laughed in his heart because of this little episode. He never thought that Lu Laodao had such a relationship. He could see that Lu Laodao loved Shirquizi, and that the female Taoist didn't hate Lu Laodao, and even had a little favorable impression of him. But the two were so far away from each other, and it wasn't convenient for him to fall in love with them. What was the story between them? Passing through the carriages and horses on the street, they arrived at the front of the Chionghua building. Someone blocked the view before, so they couldn't see clearly. But now they found that there were already some people waiting by the big stone lion on the left. The big stone lion in front of the Chionghua building was as high as 2 people. The middle of the stone lion was spacious, and the door was wide open, just like the door of the abandoned palace of the former dynasty in the city of Wei, which expanded a small square. A group of Taoists in green Taoist robes were waiting by the stone lion on the left. 2 manservants were also waiting there. Seeing those in simple clothes, they politely led them over, looked at the invitation, said a few words and asked them to wait there. So they knew that they were probably here to welcome guests like them. Those in fancy clothes and horses would go straight to the front door and wouldn't be stopped. But it was not a rude thing. In such an era, in such a world, there was a difference in status. If these unruly Taoists who were invited to come in with those high-ranking officials and dignitaries, they would be like Lu Laodao, feeling even more uncomfortable. Seeing the 3 of them coming, a tall and thin manservant came forward and bowed. 3 Taoist masters. Are you here for the meeting? Do you have an invitation? Shirkuizi bowed back, took out a small red invitation, and handed it to the manservant. Then another one led her over. Lao Dao frowned slightly, and took out his invitation hesitantly from his sleeve, because it was different from Shirkuizi's. Chapter 75. The manservant was just taking a look at it as usual. He just glanced at it and then passed it. For such a grand event with so many big shots, those who dared to come were not here to make trouble. He took a look at it and said, "This way." However, after saying these 4 words he paused. He subconsciously looked at the invitation again, then raised his head to look at the old Taoist and Li Yunxin. He knew the style of the invitation that Lu Laodao handed to him. Gilded, delicate, and complicated. There were a total of 12 copies, all for the top figures in the city of Wei. Now this thing appeared in Lu Laodao's hands. He stared at Taoist Lu for a while before asking politely with an apologetic smile. "Master Taoist, you look a little familiar. May I ask if we are fated to meet before?" Chionghua Building was the top place of entertainment in the city of Wei. Those who work here and come out to welcome the guests today must be clever people with clear minds. They would not be like the people in the fairy tales Li Yunxin had read, who only looked at people with their eyes, but did not think with their brains. Therefore, he asked cleverly if Lao Dao was from the city of Wei. If he was, he should be able to recognize him with this invitation. The old Taoist was not a brat. He knew that something might have gone wrong. He said, "Well, I am from the city of Wei, the Dragon King Temple on Taoxi Road in Liuhe Prefecture. I am the temple attendant there." The manservant thought for a while and smiled. "Master Tao, please wait a moment. Something might have gone wrong. I dare not make a decision, and have to report to the manager. There is a chair here. Would you like to take a rest?" There were tables and chairs in the reception area for the 2 manservants to record the guests. They gave them to the manservants. Lao Dao saw that he was polite and hurried to say, it's okay. You can go now." The manservant gave way again and excused himself. He held the invitation and trotted into the building. Originally, no one would have noticed this place until such a small interlude happened. Shirkuizi walked into the crowd and greeted a few people. When she turned to look at Lu Laodao, she found that the master and disciple were stopped. Those who were waiting here were all familiar with each other. Since there were cultivators in this world, the Tao must be flourishing. Rogue Taoists did not have the heavenly heart technique to practice, but they did have many ways to strengthen their bodies and meditate to refine their qi. This was also a world where demons and mythological beasts did exist. Therefore, there were many Taoist temples and temples near the city of Wei. Cultivators knew each other's sex, and these rogue Taoists at least knew each other. A few people saw that Shirkuizi came with Lao Dao, so they asked about Lao Dao's identity. Seeing that he was stopped, they couldn't help but start discussing. There were about 20 to 30 people waiting on this side. From time to time, they would glance in that direction, and Lao Dao would feel uncomfortable. Shirkuizi walked over slowly and asked, "What's going on?" Li Yunqin smiled in his heart. This Taoist nun really liked Lao Dao. She wanted to come and talk to him, so that he would not be too embarrassed. The old Taoist told her the reason. When Shirkuizi heard him say this, she let out a soft sound. "There's such a thing. Maybe it's a mistake." Hearing the invitation from Lao Dao, she knew that it was for a distinguished guest. She and Lu Lao Dao had known each other for a long time, so she knew that he would not be that kind of distinguished guest. But she was worried that Lao Dao would feel uncomfortable, so she smiled and turned to Li Yunqin saying, "You should know that your teacher is actually very capable." Lu Lao Dao was embarrassed. Shirkuizi thought that he was being modest, and said, "There are 5 painters in the city of Wei who have the artistic conception, and your teacher is one of them, although he is not as good as the other 4. While saying this, she smiled and glanced at Lu Lao Dao. "But compared to us, he is a real master. Your teacher cultivated and understood the Dharma access by himself. When he was in his 20s, he met your grandmaster and was taught the method of cultivation. Alas, fate makes fools of people." Shirkuizi sighed sincerely. If your teacher was lucky enough to meet a monk from the cave sect who came out to travel the secular world when he was young, maybe he would be a celestial being today. Li Yunqin looked at Lu Lao Dao in surprise, but Shirkuizi thought that he never knew that his teacher was so good. But he really didn't know. Li Yunqin was taught by her parents and the 2 Taoist painters, little by little. His starting point was higher than that of any painter or Taoist painters in the world. Therefore, even the 4 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei and the emptiness realm painter in the capital were like children's play in his eyes. Why would he care about the level of Lu Lao Dao compared to those unruly Taoists? It was like in his previous world, a billionaire wouldn't care about the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire. In fact, in his eyes, they were still a little bit rich. From the looks of it, what old Taoist Lu said to him in the past was not all bragging. He used to be on the edge of artistic conception, but now he could be considered a serious painter of artistic conception. He also paid attention to the situation of the 4 painters of artistic conception. They were all born in the rich and powerful families in the city of Wei, and they got to where they were with all kinds of Dharma access and resources. It was not unreasonable to say that it was hard for a poor family to have a noble son. But a person like Lu Lao Dao, who had no roots and no foundation, really relied on his own ability to get to where he was today. Li Yunqin felt that he probably looked down on him in the past. Just as the old Taoist was about to say a few humble words, the manservant had already rushed over with the steward. Without waiting for Lao Dao to speak, the steward hurriedly bowed and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. It's my servant who is inexperienced and missed your time. I have reprimanded him. Today, I don't want him to be an eyesore. Please come with me. I will lead you into the building." Lao Dao and Shirkuizi were stunned. The people waiting there also heard the steward's words and looked over. Those who knew Lu Lao Dao frowned slightly and thought about what happened. Those who were not familiar with him were listening. Lu Lao Dao asked subconsciously, "That invitation, didn't it say that something went wrong?" The steward had seen many nobles who came to the building and knew that some people looked kind, but were actually very strange and not easy to joke with. He thought that he was teasing him because he was unhappy, so he hurriedly smiled and said, "That's because the children have eyes but don't recognize Mount Tai. You, Taoist Hun Yuanzi, are one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei. This invitation is for you. There are 12 invitations in total. Except for the 5 of you, the other 7 invitations are all top-notch figures. How could there be a problem?" The steward only thought that Lao Dao felt that he had lost face because he was stopped in front of these wild Taoists. Therefore, in order to help him gain face and appease his anger, she used a voice that was neither too loud nor too soft, but was just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. But Lu Lao Dao's reputation, as one of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei, was mostly said by himself, and others listened to him. At this moment, the steward said it seriously and seriously. The group of people were stunned. After a short while, before they could say anything, they heard a young man sneer from the side of the main entrance. Can you even say such a joke here? Chapter 76. In fact, the person who spoke looked to be about the same age as Li Yunxin, and was dressed similarly. Although he was not as handsome as Li Yunxin, he was still a delicate boy. He was also wearing a green Taoist robe, with a bun and a wooden hairpin. But if one looked closely, the craftsmanship of his Taoist robe was quite different from that of Li Yunxin. If the green Taoist robe was opened, one would find that the inside was made of satin, and the ordinary-looking wooden hairpin on his head was made of agarwood. Looking at the person beside him, it was an old man about 50 years old. He was dressed similarly, looking clean and simple, but in fact it was low-key luxury. The people waiting here were all older than the young man, but no one rebuked him, even though he interrupted with a disdainful tone. Because of the identity of the old man beside him, those artists who often went in and out of the city of Wei all knew that he was indeed a painter of artistic conception. The Yu family in the city of Wei was called Yu Mengda, and his Taoist name was Xianqingzi. And this Yu family was indeed the Yu family of Yu Meng. Although it was not the main family, it was also a wealthy family in the city of Wei. The young man saw that everyone was looking at him, but he did not feel uncomfortable. He had been with Xianqingzi for a long time, and had seen a lot of things, so he naturally had a calm and arrogant temperament. He said again, "I only know that there are 4 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei. When did the 5th one appear? Some words can be joked in private, but it's not appropriate to say it on such an occasion." When he finished, he glanced at Lu Laodao and nodded slightly. "It's not against you. But today, the Qianghua building is full of distinguished guests. Some words are a joke, and also a disgrace to the painters of the city of Wei. I think you can understand?" Xianqingzi beside him did not say anything, but did not leave either. He only looked at Lu Laodao with his eyes. Perhaps it was inconvenient for him to say something because of his status, so he let this clever little Taoist boy beside him say it. The young man did not speak seriously and said too much, so he just scolded him casually. Originally, with his status and position, he would not bother with someone like Lu Laodao. But before he came, he had indeed heard that the 5th conception painter would be coming today. It was because his good friend, Taoist Pananzi of the Ling Su sword sect, had returned to his sect and couldn't come, so he gave the invitation to Taoist Hunyuanzi. Xianqingzi wanted to be friends with Pananzi for a long time. However, most cultivators were perverse and temperamental. It took him a long time to establish a good impression of them and meet them a few times. Originally, he wanted to go to Qianghua Tower today. Now that he had paved the way, he wanted to deepen his relationship with Pananzi and try to ask if he could get some Xianmen techniques. Who knew that after operating for so long, he would suddenly return to the sect? Cultivators have long lives. It was unknown how long it would take for them to return. Xianqingzi, on the other hand, could not wait for long. It was even more likely that all of his plans would be ruined. Thus, he was already rather unhappy. When they were about to enter the door, the Taoist boy beside him heard their words and scolded them. So he simply let them be. Besides, what was Hunyuanzi's identity? He had heard of him before. He was just a temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple. Seeing these wild cultivators flatter each other in front of the tower, he already felt it was very funny. Now this person was really going to sit with him. It was simply ridiculous. It has to be said that although Pananzi didn't come today, another immortal was coming. A rare disciple of the heavenly grotto heaven. If someone like Hunyuanzi went to the table, wouldn't it be a joke? Thus, when the Taoist boy asked that last question, he still didn't say anything. Now Lu Laodao's expression was not good. Shirquizi also frowned. Everyone knew what kind of person Xianqingzi was. He could endure a few words from the Taoist boy. After the two of them talked and left, although these people felt awkward, they could still joke around and forget about it. But today, after the Taoist boy asked, "I think you understand," he slightly raised his chin and didn't leave. He was waiting for Lu Laodao's reply, being lectured by a teenager in front of so many people. And now he had to respond. Anyone would feel embarrassed. If he really said, I understand today, then he would really become a joke. But if he ignored it because of his backbone and made Qianqingzi embarrassed in this situation, then he would probably be in a more terrifying situation in the future. Lu Laodao's eyes quickly swept over Shirkuizi, and his face turned red. The wild cultivators behind him also became silent. Even those who were not familiar with Old Taoist, Lu felt a sense of sympathy for the death of a rabbit. In just 1 or 2 seconds, the atmosphere became extremely awkward. However, just as the little Taoist boy suddenly interrupted, another equally young voice rang out. What's wrong with learning at such a young age? Learning to show off. Everyone was stunned at first, and then looked at the disciple Yun Xinzi beside Lu Laodao, who stood up for his master, with a "Are you crazy?" look. But they didn't know where this handsome little Taoist boy came from. In the eyes of so many people, facing Qianqingzi's suddenly gloomy face, he was still calm and composed, and even, they didn't know if it was an illusion, there was even a relaxed and happy smile on his lips. The Taoist boy beside Qianqingzi was stunned at first, and then he gasped and said in an incredulous voice, "Are you talking to me? How dare you?" Li Yunxin sighed. "I say, why are you so troublesome? Here, look, which one of them isn't your elder? A group of seniors are talking here, and you just had to interrupt. If no one paid attention to you when you interrupted, you should just leave quickly. Why do you have to stand here and wait for someone to answer? There are so many people coming and going, and they all see you, a child, rolling around here without any discipline from an adult. You said you're afraid of making a fool of yourself today. Do you think this is considered a joke? Everyone knows that the little Taoist boy beside the great painter Qianqingzi of the city of Wei has no manners, no respect for his elders, and is suffering from chinibyu in broad daylight. I simply can't bear to look at it." Li Yunxin spoke with great emotion, and at the end, he gave an expression of "can't bear to look at it." The little Taoist boy was dumbfounded by his words. He was at a loss for words, but more than that, he was astonished. This person dared to talk to him like this. He gritted his teeth, and a burst of anger came out of his nostrils. When he was about to retort, he saw Li Yunxin nodding to Qianqingzi. "I'll help you to discipline him. I think you can understand." It was just as he had expected. Qianqingzi looked at him without saying a word. Then the gloomy look on his face suddenly disappeared, and he nodded slightly to the steward. "Take good care of this Taoist Han Yuanzi. Don't neglect him. After all, he's a distinguished guest." Then he nodded to Lu Laodao. "Fellow Taoist, see you upstairs." After that, he flung his sleeves and strode into the door. The little Taoist boy didn't say anything. He glared at Li Yunxin and quickly followed. A person of Qianqingzi's status, of course he wouldn't argue with an ignorant kid here in public, because he didn't expect that someone would dare to not give him face here. Seeing that they had left, Lu Laodao hurriedly pulled Li Yunxin to the side and whispered, "Brother Xan, why?" He knew that Li Yunxin had a clever heart. He also knew that Li Yunxin initially planned to live in seclusion in the city of Wei, and didn't want to cause too much trouble. But today, he angered Qianqingzi on such an occasion. Lu Laodao wasn't worried that Brother Xan had no way to solve the problem, but he was afraid that the other party caused this trouble just for him. The people behind him saw that Laodao pulled the little Taoist boy to the side and whispered to him, and thought that it was to teach him a lesson. It was a moment of sharp-tongued venting. But everyone saw Qianqingzi's performance. He was definitely going to embarrass Lu Laodao upstairs. But Li Yunxin just smiled slightly. "Don't panic. I'm playing a big game of chess. He just came over to ask for a beating. Besides, no one will step on me when I go upstairs. How can I happily show off?" Author's note. If any of you think, how would the ancients understand the meaning of the word show off? Author, you're not following the script to show off. Then don't be anxious. The setting here is clear. As for why it is clear, it's not a forced setting. There are explanations. Chapter 77. Seeing Li Yunxin's expression, Lu Laodao realized that his brother Xian was plotting something again. He didn't have any ambition. He just followed Li Yunxin and got involved in a lot of troubles. But even until today, he didn't feel regret. Instead he felt, well, it seemed to be good. Compared to the previous days, he felt much better. So he was relieved. Then Lao Dao, what should I do? You just need to eat and drink properly. Li Yunxin said casually. Today I just showed my face. Oh, are those temple attendants around the city of Wei? How's the incense there? Lao Dao didn't know why his brother Xian cared about this. But he knew he couldn't keep up with his imagination, so he said, in fact, the incense is better than our temples, better than ours now. The people in the city of Wei are more knowledgeable. Their minds are more flexible and not sincere. But when we go to the villages outside, the folk customs are much simpler, and the people are much more pious. Moreover, there's only one temple in dozens of miles. Although there are not as many people as in the city of Wei, there are fewer temples. So in this way, it's better than ours. That's not bad. Li Yunxin thought for a while. I've seen a few temples in the city. They're all clay sculptures. Many of the clay sculptures are just clay sculptures, without any divine position. Are those also clay sculptures in those temples? Why don't they use portraits? At this time, Sherqueezy walked over. Hearing his question, she was slightly stunned. She thought Lao Dao was teaching Li Yunxin a lesson. She had a good impression of this little Taoist boy. She felt that although he got into trouble, he was really good to his master. So she wanted to speak up for him. But she found out that they were talking about this matter. But it didn't sound like a conversation between a master and a disciple. But she still couldn't help but say a few words. When you go upstairs, bear with it as much as you can. You're a filial child. But your master is in a difficult position. You can't be like this in the future. Li Yunxin didn't mind Sherqueezy's tone. It was a kind of advice from an elder, and it was all out of kindness. He only smiled and nodded. Yes. Sherqueezy was surprised again. This little Taoist was a little strange. At this moment, he became calm and composed again. He was like a completely different person from before. What was going on with him? The manager of Cheonghua Pavilion also came over and sighed. Taoist master, please follow me upstairs. Originally, when the steward confirmed that the invitation in Lao Dao's hands was correct, the Taoist priests felt honored. After all, they were of similar origins. However, after what happened before, they all felt that Lu Lao Dao was most likely going to suffer. Therefore, when she looked at him now, she could only sigh in her heart. However, Lu Lao Dao's face did not show much apprehension. Instead, he walked in front of the steward while talking to Li Yunxin. They were talking about what happened just now. Although most of the temple attendants are painters, only a few of them can draw decent paintings. Most of them draw something that calms the heart and calms the house. They are sold to pilgrims, but their effect is limited. As for drawing a portrait of the real deity in the temple like Brother Xian, it's unthinkable. If you have the ability to draw the Reiki of the deity, you don't need to be a temple attendant anymore. Oh, how about I draw for them? Well, I trust Brother Xian's ability. Lao Dao listened to his words and paused. But it's hard to say about the others. That temple is the temple where they settle down. Some of the statues do have deities on them. If Brother Xian wants them to destroy the deity and replace it with a new one, probably only a few people can trust me, Lao Dao. But the others? I understand. Li Yunxin nodded. When we go upstairs, just answer whatever they ask you. I'll take care of everything. At this time, the two followed the steward through the lobby on the first floor and went to the second floor. In the past, when Lu Lao Dao came to Cheonghua Tower and saw the jewels in the tower, he would look at them carefully and keep them as a topic of conversation in the future. But after hearing what Li Yunxin said, he suddenly panicked for no reason. He didn't know why, but he felt something was wrong. Brother Xian was still Brother Xian, but today, or recently, Brother Xian was not right. The old Taoist had a feeling that he might be doing something very big, so big that he might never see him again. When they stepped on the last step, the steward stepped aside and said, "Please come in. I'll lead you here." Lu Lao Dao stopped thinking and looked forward. The second floor of Cheonghua Tower was very spacious. It was a complete lobby, supported by only 2 rows of pillars in the middle. According to Li Yunxin's impression, it was very similar to the layout of the main hall of the Imperial Palace that he saw in movies and TV series. On the other side of the lobby, There was a huge gilded screen facing the entrance of the stairs. In front of the screen was the chair. The seat was naturally the table. The table in Xianghua Tower was actually quite old-fashioned, the separate dining system. In fact, this was also a more formal banquet system in the Daqing state. Everyone had a table in front of them, sat on their knees, and drank several rounds of wine in a row. Seeing this scene, Lu Laodao showed a bitter face. He had never seen this kind of situation, and he didn't know anything about etiquette. There were 13 seats in the lobby, the chair in the center, and 6 seats on each side. Thinking of the steward saying that there were only 12 invitations, he guessed that they should be for the 12 people. But no one had taken the seats yet. There were 30 to 40 people in the lobby. They were chatting casually in 2s and 3s, as if they were waiting for the host. This scene was familiar to Li Yunqin. If everyone had a glass of wine in their hands, he would feel that this was more like the upper-class gatherings in his world. The people in the hall only glanced at them for a while, then turned their faces away and ignored them. Li Yunqin smiled. We also ignore them. He knew that it must be the Taoist apprentice of Xuanqing, who came in and said something. In fact, among these people, just a few words were enough to exclude the old Taoist and himself. They were not in the same circle to begin with. Since they ignored them, he was not in a hurry. He walked to the window with Lu Laodao. Beside the window of Qianghua Tower was a fence that looked like a gazebo. There were seats and small tables. There were some cold fruits on the small tables. They were yellow, green, red, purple, and purple. It was very beautiful. The two of them sat down and rested here, watching the people in the hall talk loudly. The Taoist apprentice of Xuanqing had been looking for an opportunity to meet Li Yunqin's eyes, so that he could express to him, "Just wait and see. I'll teach you a lesson later." Unfortunately, Li Yunqin had long since passed the age of arguing with a teenager. He only glanced at the layout of the lobby, and then thought about his own matters. At first, he thought that Yin Pingji had set up an overt plot for him. But just now, when he was outside the building, he knew that this was not something that Yin Pingji could do. Then the others would not target Lu Laodao, but himself. Someone had brought him here. Through Yin Pingji, he had fallen into the wrong thinking and lowered his guard. This person was very clever. As Li Yunqin thought about it, he slowly looked at the crowd. Who could it be? He actually made him suffer a small loss. Chapter 78. But after looking at it for a while, Li Yunqin was stunned when he accidentally met the eyes of the little Taoist boy. Just now, when they were downstairs, Shirquizi said that they received the invitation yesterday and hurried over, only arriving today. 10 kilometers was not a short distance in this era. The person who sent the invitation must have left earlier. If they had ridden horses or taken ox carts, they should have left yesterday morning. So the decision of Ling Kongzi inviting them to the meeting should have been made by him yesterday. That was to say, Ling Kongzi had already arrived in the city of Wei before meeting him yesterday. Yin Pingji couldn't get one of the 12 high-level invitations, so it was made by Ling Kongzi. It was not a coincidence that the woman went to the Qiao family to see him yesterday. Li Yunqin was stunned, and the little Taoist boy became complacent. He thought that Li Yunqin talked back to him before, because he didn't know who he was. Now seeing him here, the little Taoist boy was shocked. He thought that he shouldn't dress too low-key when he went out. Today a powerful person was coming, and he didn't know what that person would wear, so he dressed like this. If he went out in luxurious clothes, the guy by the window probably wouldn't dare to say a word. But he couldn't let them go because of this. The little Taoist boy smiled at Li Yunqin insidiously and pointed at him. This idiot. Li Yunqin turned his eyes away and continued to think about his own things. There were probably 2 reasons why the first disciple of the Langye cave haven't paid attention to him. One was the death of the 3 swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect. The 2 cultivators in the city of Wei were idiots, but it didn't mean that all the cultivators in the world were idiots. It was reasonable for Ling Kongzi to suspect him. After seeing what he did in the Qiao family that day, his suspicion could almost be confirmed. But he didn't make a move and behave politely. The other thing was, it was the Jade Slip of Enlightenment. If it was because of the Jade Slip of Enlightenment, it would be even worse. In fact, if either of these two things were confirmed, it would be a matter of life and death. However, as Li Yunxin sat by the window and deduced these two thoughts, he smiled instead. Lu Laodao was carefully picking the fruits from the corners of the fruit platter to eat. He didn't want to look too ugly and ruin the decorations. At this time, when he inadvertently looked at Li Yunxin, he found that his brother Xian had a strange smile on his face. This was the second time he saw Li Yunxin's unusual smile today. But this time, it wasn't a warm smile. But after all, Lu Laodao did not have much experience. But if it was a scoundrel who mingled in the streets all year round, he would find the smile on Li Yunxin's face to be quite familiar. It was the dangerous and excited smile of a skilled gambler who was faced with an unavoidable gamble. At this time, Ling Kongzi stopped at the back street of the Jade Flower Pavilion and said to Song Yunzi, "You don't have to come today." Lao Dao of the Pill Cauldron sect of the Shangqing sect froze. "Fairy, what do you mean?" "I came here to do two things." Ling Kongzi raised his head slightly and looked at the second floor. One of them is to investigate the deaths of the 3 swordsmen of the Ling Su sword sect. The death of 3 swordsmen in the mortal world is not a small matter. Before I came here, I met the sword sage. The sword sage knew that I was going to travel, so he gave me some instructions. "You met the sages?" Song Yunzi's eyes widened, because no one had seen the 2 sages for almost 100 years. However, Ling Kongzi didn't answer this meaningless question. "I was investigating you and Pananzi before. But now, I don't think you did it. You're not smart enough. So, you don't have to come to the Baohua Guild to avoid delaying my business." Song Yunzi didn't know if he should be happy or sad after hearing this. He hesitated for a while and said, "Fairy, what about the other thing you did?" Ling Kongzi narrowed his eyes and looked at the second floor. "Killing demons." After saying this, she paused and added, "The remnants of the art sage." Song Yunzi frowned slightly. "Huh. Oh, you don't know about the art sage." Ling Kongzi nodded. "Do you want to know?" Song Yunzi was stunned for a while. However, Ling Kongzi didn't seem to be asking for his opinion. "You only know about the 2 sages, but you don't know about the 3 sages. 2,000 years. It's long enough for you to forget everything. Then you should know about Taoist Danqing. Taoist Danqing's cultivation method is different from Daotong and Kenzo, but it's the heavenly heart Dharma. Aren't you curious about it? That's a well-organized, systematic, and solid cultivation method, but there's no higher, transcendent cultivation method. Don't you think it's strange? Because in the past, other than Daotong and Kenzo, there was also the painting sect. The Grand Master of the painting sect was called the Art Sage. Unfortunately, the Art Sage became a demon and was killed by the Devas, the 2 sages, and other cultivators. The remaining Taoist Danqing used to be the disciples of the Art Sage. Look at the painters in the market. Now that they worship the 2 saints, they feel that the mediocre techniques they cultivate are just leftovers left by the cultivators of the orthodoxies and sword sections. But they don't know that those are the remaining cultivation methods of the painting sect, passed down by the art sage who was killed by the 2 sages. "Ah, I shouldn't be called the art sage. It's the art demon. I'm here to kill the demon. Do you understand now?" Song Yunzi was dumbfounded. This was because Ling Kongzi had just poured out all these secrets of the past that were related to the 2 saints to him just like that. He didn't want to hear it at all. There must be a reason why no one knew about these things for thousands of years. But now he knew everything. Song Yunzi spaced out for a while and suddenly felt a chill. "Fairy, are you saying that the demon you want to kill this time is also at the Baohua gathering?" "Fairy, what do you want me to do by telling me all this?" "You can't do anything. Your level is too low, and your brain is not smart enough," Ling Kongzi said as she walked. "Go back. I'm telling you, but I'm too annoyed to keep these things in my heart. It's better to say it out. Now you know, if I accidentally tell others, I'm also a demon. I'll kill them all." After saying this, she took a few more steps and walked up to the sky, as if there was a row of invisible steps in the air. After a dozen more steps, she arrived at the second floor of Cheonghua Building, behind the gilded screen. She stopped and looked at the people through the gap of the screen, then at Li Yunxin. How did you do it? She looked for a while, and suddenly tilted her head slightly. She said in a low voice, interesting. Chapter 79. Behind the gold-plated screen was a large soft couch. Usually, when one was tired from banquets, they could come here to rest, or when they were in the mood to laugh with the dancers. Ling Kongzi looked at Li Yunxin for a while, then turned to look at the soft couch, as if he wanted to rest on it. But he seemed to have thought of something or seen something, and he frowned slightly. At this time, the voices in the front hall suddenly grew louder. The originally small chatter turned into a wave of greetings and compliments. One of the leaders of today's Baohua gathering, Great Master Pei Juzi, had arrived. Lu Laodao also hurriedly got up. Li Yunxin was still leaning against the railing by the window. In any case, his identity today was that of a little Taoist boy. With so many people here, no one would pay attention to him. What's more, when Great Master Pei Juzi and his group came up, there was a group of wild Taoists following behind them. The main character had arrived, so they could also take the stage. But in the end, there was still a difference in status. Originally, these tables by the window with plates of melons and fruits were prepared for these people. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked at Pei Juzi. He originally wasn't interested in Pei Juzi. He only glanced at him out of instinct. But after this glance, he couldn't move his eyes away. This person, something was wrong. Everyone had their own characteristics and unique hobbies, no matter how unconventional they were. It wasn't that the big shots always had a high and mighty face, and the poor always had a submissive appearance. But this Pei Juzi in front of him, Li Yunxin felt extremely strange. Looking at his clothing, skin color, and appearance, he was indeed a person who lived in luxury. But looking at his expression, it was quite awkward. Others might not dare to stare at him out of respect or fear. But Li Yunxin found that he was actually pretending to be reserved. He seemed to be trying his best to keep a straight face and not smile. But his eyes were wandering, and his body language was saying, "Is there anything fun? Delicious food? Why is it different from what I imagined? What's going on?" Li Yunxin made a soft sound of surprise and sat up straight. Today was more fun than he had imagined. It was also at this time that the sky slowly darkened. Looking out of the window, one could see that the setting sun had been shrouded by thick clouds. A thick layer of burning clouds appeared in the western sky, but as the clouds became thicker and thicker, even the light of the sunset disappeared. Night arrived an hour earlier than usual. However, the banquet had already been prepared, and the candles were already prepared. The servants quickly filed in, lit the candles in the hall, and covered the hall with a windproof cover. Although the eaves of the Jade Flower building were cleverly designed so that normal wind and rain couldn't blow through the windows, it was difficult for the wind and rain to blow in. But seeing the dark clouds looming over the city tonight, a steward still asked if the thick curtain should be lowered. Cheonghua building was located in the center of the city of Wei. The lights of the city of Wei, seen from upstairs at night, was also one of the 8 famous local sceneries. At least the boss of Cheonghua building hoped that Master Pei Juezi would like to see it and mention it after returning to the capital. The group of people looked out the window, eagerly offering advice to Grandmaster. But most of them suggested to lower the curtain to prevent Grandmaster's precious body from catching a cold. However, at this moment, a not loud voice suddenly came into everyone's ears in the midst of the noise. The dark clouds looming over the city are about to destroy the city, and the storm is coming. This is the perfect time. No need. Then the person who spoke walked out from behind the screen, walked to the chair and knelt down. "Where is the fisherman fishing, old man? Bring it to me." After a short panic that lasted no more than 3 or 4 seconds, the entire hall became silent. All the bigwigs present should know who this plainly dressed woman was. Their servants might not know, but those who could follow them today were all clever people, so they didn't dare to make a sound. Everyone moved their eyes away from Pei Juezi and looked at the woman in white. After a few seconds, a steward next to Pei Juezi said, "I wonder when Fairy Ling Kong will come. Fairy Ling Kong is really good at Taoism. good at Taoism. With this flattery, everyone came to a sudden realization, and they all chimed in. However, these echoes were done carefully. When they praised Pei Juzi, they used as much force as they could. Even if Grandmaster Pei Juezi was a descendant of a noble family, he was still a mortal. Mortals couldn't escape the emotions of mortals. These people were all smart people, so they could easily deal with Pei Juezi. But facing this fairy Ling Kong again, they felt powerless. High-level cultivators might find it hard to treat these people of the mortal world as their own. And the people of the mortal world would find it hard to treat them as their own. Even though it was vulgar, the most direct example was that when cultivators reached the transcendent state, their bodies would gradually break away from the category of traditional humans. Slowly, even if they ate and drank, they wouldn't even have excretion. Their extremely powerful physiological functions would absorb and resist everything. It was just that they looked like humans in a certain sense. Facing such a Ling Kongzi, and a woman at that, after a storm of careful praise, they didn't know what to say. Originally, they were supposed to come first and wait for the important person to appear. Pei Juezi came. Everyone chatted for a while, then sat down and waited for Fairy Ling Kong to arrive. When a master from Daotong arrived, according to the etiquette, masters had a long lifespan, so they followed the ancient etiquette. They led the master to a seat, then bowed to each other, asked the ceremonial officer to serve food and drink, responded with some words, and then Grandmaster Pei Juezi presented the painting. But now, everything was messed up. Ling Kongzi laughed lightly. Of course I walked out from behind the screen. Which one is this Pei Juezi? Where is the painting? At this time, Li Yunqin also asked Lu Laodao in a low voice. Dark clouds looming over the city. The storm is coming. Have you heard of these two lines? Which poet wrote it? Lao Dao was staring at the majestic fairy Ling Kong, and was a bit dazed for a moment. When Li Yunqin asked again, he came back to his senses, thought carefully, and said in a low voice, Brother Xian said it well. These two lines, although they don't match, the tone is also wrong. But they are both wonderful lines. Lao Dao, I have never heard of them. These lines should be written by a fairy, right? She chose two lines from her usual poems, and recited them casually. If it was written by someone else, just based on these two lines, the whole world would know. Ah, you have never heard of these two lines. Li Yunqin nodded meaningfully. Wow. Lao Dao had never heard of these two lines. Although Lu Laodao was not a scholar, since he was a painter, he was not an ignorant person. This meant that these two lines originally did not exist in this world. He knew these two lines. That person, that painting saint, should also know these two lines. It was very likely that he had said these two lines in the past. Similarly, because Lu Laodao had never heard of these two lines, it meant that these two lines were only circulated in an extremely small circle of cultivators. Otherwise, according to Lu Laodao, once these two lines were circulated in the secular world, the world would already know of these two lines. Among cultivators, there was an extremely small circle related to the painting saint. Ling Kongzi said these two lines, which meant that she was in that circle. This meant that she might know of the painting saint's secret. This meant that she might know of the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment. This meant that she might have come for the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment. This woman he could not stay. Chapter 80. The first drop of rain hit the wooden railing, creating a patch of water. The wind became stronger. The strong wind blew the gauze curtains, making them flutter. The hall that was supposed to be filled with fluttering clothes and gauze curtains was now filled with a murderous aura. After one breath, the heavy rain fell like crazy, and the world was filled with water vapor. In the strong wind, the flying gauze, and the pouring rain, Ling Kongzi sat upright in front of the table, with a calm and gentle expression on his face, and his clothes didn't move at all. She said not to put up a curtain, so no one dared to put it up. The strong wind rushed in through the window, carrying raindrops with it, and everyone's clothes were blown through. The might of the heavens and the earth combined with the imposing aura on Ling Kongzi's body caused practically everyone to hold their breaths. Some people even wondered if this storm was summoned by this fairy. The might of an immortal was not something mortals could fathom. A few seconds after she said that, the steward next to Pei Juzi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and gently pulled on the corner of his master's clothes. Tonight, the steward felt like he was going crazy. He didn't know if his master was scared, but he didn't seem right the whole day. Normally, no matter how high his status was in the secular world, no matter how good his family background was, in front of the first disciple of the heavenly paradise, he shouldn't act pretentiously. Was the status of the royal family high? But it was said that the royal family of the previous dynasty angered a master of the heavenly paradise, and at the same time, lost the favor of the Daotong and Kenzo. Thus, the first emperor of the Daqing state revolted and killed the royal family of the previous dynasty. No cultivator intervened. But now, his master seemed to have become stupid. That fairy Ling Kong had said twice that she wanted to see the painting. He still stood in the same place. And just like before, his eyeballs were rolling. No one knew what he was thinking. Until the steward pulled again, and almost everyone was urging him with their eyes. He seemed to wake up from a dream, and untied the cloth bag on his waist. Then without the slightest scruple, he pulled out the painting, walked over to Ling Kongzi's table, and placed the painting on it. Then like a puppet, he retreated a few steps back to the steward's side. His series of actions caused everyone present to break out in cold sweat. This was the first time they had seen Pei Juezi. They had never thought that this expert who was about to take over the position of the Imperial House Great Painter would have this kind of conduct and personality. Her wild and uninhibited and careless temperament could be used by any one of them here. But who dared to be like Fairy Ling Kong? Cultivators were naturally temperamental. No one would be surprised if Ling Kongzi were to fly into a rage and kill Pei Juzi in the next moment. Fortunately, the white fairy didn't seem to want to do that. She raised her head to look at Pei Juzi. Her gaze paused briefly on him before returning to the painting. Then, he slowly unrolled the painting on the table and continued to sit there attentively, looking at the painting. At this moment, everyone realized there was no singing or dancing, no small talk, no etiquette. The Baohua gathering had already begun. Perhaps this was how cultivators did things. This was simple and direct. The fisherman fishing the old was a rare painting. Most of the people present had a rare chance to see it. Thus, even those who were afraid of Ling Kongzi's unfathomable and temperamental stretched their necks to look more closely. The four painters could see some things, but not enough. As for the ordinary people, they could only look at the painting and the feelings it gave them. Lu Laodao was so anxious that his eyes widened, because a group of people were slowly moving over and blocking the painting. After a while, there would probably be people holding the painting and letting the wild Taoists by the window take a look from afar. But how could it compare to seeing it up close? Li Yunxin smiled and patted his arm. Go over and look. You're in the 12 seats, what are you afraid of? At this time, the people in front covered Ling Kongzi's figure, and the wild Taoists by the window also dared to talk in low voices. Only then did they shiver and greet each other in the howling wind and rain. Shirkuizi crossed her arms and moved to Lu Laodao's side. Go. When you see it, come back and tell us. When Li Yunxin spoke, Laodao hesitated slightly, but when Shirkuizi urged him, he no longer hesitated. He stood up and swept his gaze over the Taoists around him. He smoothed his beard and said, Okay, I'll go now. No matter why he was invited, at least at this moment, he felt that he had gained face in front of his fellow Taoists. When Lu Laodao left, Li Yunxin's smile disappeared, and he stared at Pei Juzi again. He had originally come for the fisherman fishing the old. But when he looked, he found something even more interesting. That Pei Juzi wasn't human. At first, he only felt that his expression was strange. But ever since the thunder rumbled in the sky and the rain poured down, Pei Juzi's expression became dull. Li Yunxin felt that this dullness was because he was trying to focus on dealing with something, fighting against some kind of power. That was why he became like this. He was trying his best, and even at a certain moment, Li Yunxin saw something burrow out of his body. It looked like a leg with thick black hair. But only for a moment. It shrank back as if it was electrocuted. This Pei Juzi, he wasn't the original Pei Juzi. What he saw was that the thing that possessed his body, because it was trying too hard to fight against some kind of power, almost came out of its body. The most reasonable explanation was that it was fighting against Ling Kongzi. But when Li Yunxin looked at Ling Kongzi, he felt that this woman didn't notice the abnormality of the great painter. This was also very strange. She was a cultivator at the peak of transcendent state, but she couldn't see through a ghost that possessed her body. Li Yunxin tried to close his eyes and only use his spirit energy to sense. The result was a real shock. Indeed, he couldn't sense the ghost chi. This thing had some tricks up its sleeves. Then it was probably fighting against some kind of power from another existence. He opened his eyes and glanced at the dark clouds outside the window. Interesting. Tonight, there would be a parade of demons and ghosts. The people of high status had all gone to look at the paintings, and their attendants had retreated to the window, waiting for the host to start the banquet. The little Taoist boy who had been taught a lesson by Li Yunxin outside the building walked over trembling. He purposely moved closer to Li Yunxin and looked at him with a proud expression. You still have the mood to sit. Do you know what will happen later? Li Yunxin was thinking about something and made some last-minute changes to his plan, so he answered casually, I don't know. The little Taoist boy saw that he was a little dazed and thought that he was distracted by tonight's scene, so he became even more proud. Then, do you want to know? Li Yunxin rolled his eyes, annoyed that the boy was interrupting his thoughts. No. The little Taoist boy was stunned, and then he became angry. Hey, you are so stubborn. Let me tell you. In a while, my master will ask your master to give the painting to the immortal. You know what your master is capable of. It must be very crude. Hey, at that time, my master will say that your master is disrespectful to the immortal. Since he is one of the 12 masters, how can he be so weak? Of course, he didn't do his best. At that time, no matter whether the immortal is angry or not, the governor and the governor who are sitting with him will definitely be angry. Just you two. Chapter 81. Li Yunxin stood up, sighed slightly, and gave him a slap on the face. He had already carefully controlled his strength to prevent himself from slapping him to death and causing more trouble. He only wanted to interrupt him so that he could think properly. But even so, the little Taoist boy still made a sound. He spun around dizzily and fell to the ground with a thud. The wild Taoists around widened their eyes as they watched this scene. Li Yunxin sat down again and thought about his plan. This sound alarmed the few big shots in front of him. They frowned slightly and turned around to look. They saw the little Taoist boy crawling up from the ground with his hands and feet. He spun around and covered his face as he looked for someone to look at. But when he saw their eyes, he quickly stood up straight and put down his hands. What's wrong? Xianqingzi scolded him in a low voice. I am in a storm. The little Taoist boy gritted his teeth and pursed his lips. He was so angry that he was about to cry. I fell myself. Xianqingzi glared at him, then looked at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin smiled at him. Then he mouthed, hit me. Xianqingzi's face instantly turned red. He turned his head away hatefully. Sherquizi hurriedly tugged at Li Yunxin's sleeve. You child, she said in a low voice. You child, why are you so? Auntie, you also know that naughty children are difficult to manage. Li Yunxin looked at her and sighed. He's very annoying with his nagging. I don't want to argue with naughty children, and I don't want to hit him. But if I persuade him, he will use his rich experience to defeat me. What else can I do? Sherquizi also sighed. Sigh. But you made things difficult for your master. You are a good child, but what he said just now, although he might not do it, he will still make things difficult for you in the future. Li Yunxin smiled and shook his head. You are wrong. What he said just now, it's not that he might not do it, but he will definitely do it. You are a kind person, and you may not think badly of others. But those people like to go to the extreme, especially when they are dealing with people who are not on the same level as them. For example, I won't persuade the naughty child to stop babbling. I'll just slap him in the face and interrupt him. Simple violence. As for them, they won't teach us a lesson or teach us a lesson. Killing people like us is as easy as crushing an ant. So it won't be difficult for them to simply crush us. Why would they bother to think about other things? Either I don't care about you at all, or I'm going to take extreme measures. That's how I and the rest of them are. Neither of them are good people, and we know each other very well. He had already thought of some things, so he was in the mood to chat with Sherqueezy. Sherqueezy heard his words, and so did the people nearby. The young Taoist covered his face and walked over hatefully. He also heard the last few sentences. For a moment, they were a little surprised. Han Yuanzi's little Taoist boy could actually say such words. It wasn't something he could say at all. Xianqingzi's little Taoist boy gritted his teeth and held back his tears. He pointed at him and said with a trembling voice, "Good, good, good. It's good that you know. You." Li Yunqing acted as if he was introducing him. He stretched out his palm and said, "Auntie, look. Just like this. He's such an old child, and he doesn't have any sense of right or wrong. He can be the most ruthless, and he can also be the most ruthless. Sometimes school bullying, oh, you don't know what it means, is done at this age. Just like today, he did it, or wanted to do it, but no one can stop him or punish him. There's no fair environment. What should he do? Then kill him." Li Yunqing turned to the little Taoist boy. "For example, this little bastard, a disobedient child who likes to harm others. What should we do? Just beat him to death. Then, you see, you and your master plan to kill us, and now I'm not happy. So, I plan to kill you and your master later. Let's make a bet. Do you dare to bet?" As Li Yunqing spoke, his whole body exuded a murderous aura. The murderous aura and killing intent of ordinary people was a kind of force. But the murderous aura, emitted by people like him, actually contained some spiritual energy. He was really afraid of people. When the little Taoist boy saw the look in his eyes, he finally felt a little afraid. He stretched out his hand, but couldn't say anything. He only said you a few times in a trembling voice, and then hurriedly walked to the side. Li Yunqing then sat down with a normal expression. At this time, Sherqueezy only looked at him, and didn't say anything. The wild Taoist boy beside him also didn't say anything. Although he had only cultivated some minor techniques, he could more or less feel some spiritual power. So they all felt the real murderous aura from Li Yunqing. It was also at this time that they realized that this little Taoist boy, who looked different from the others, might not just be a Taoist boy. Li Yunqing thought about it and smiled at Sherqueezy. "All right. Let's say it. In fact, I'm not Han Yuanzi's Taoist boy. I originally planned to stay in the city of Wei for a few more days, but it seems that I can't stay for a few days. But I have a good impression of Lao Dao. So I'm more afraid that after I leave, someone will cause trouble for Lao Dao. For example, that Xianqingzi. I touched him once outside the building, and just now, I touched him again. In fact, I did it on purpose. I purposely wanted him to go against me, so that it would be convenient for me to do something later. But in this way, he will hate Lao Dao. Then, for the sake of Lu Lao Dao's future, I probably have to kill him. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome. To deal with these people, I have to beat them until they are convinced. Otherwise, there will be endless troubles in the future." Hearing his words, the others were even more dumbfounded. Sherqueezy was a woman, so her psychological endurance was probably slightly stronger. After being dumbfounded, she slowly thought about his words and then frowned. Let's not talk about whether what you said is true or false. But your words don't make sense. You said that you provoked that Xianqingzi to make things convenient for yourself." Sherqueezy frowned and slowly organized her words. "Then, you were unreasonable first. But now that you've used him, you said that you were afraid that he would not stop pestering you. So you wanted to kill him. Your reason? Are you bullying me?" Li Yunqing suddenly laughed. "Ha ha ha. You are after all the woman that my teacher likes. You have good values. And I also like you very much. That's right, I'm bullying people. But he has no choice. Auntie, in the future, you have to remember one thing. Don't reason with evil people. Unless the environment you are in can support you to reason with evil people. A good person will not want to kill me because of such a small matter. So he is not a good person. Then his death is not to be regretted." Sherqueezy finally couldn't help saying. "Then didn't you want to kill him because of these things?" Li Yunqing smiled and winked at her. So, I am also not a good person. But since you are the woman that my teacher likes, I will give them a chance for your sake. If they don't court death later, then they won't die, all right? Chapter 82. As he said this, he was standing by the window with the wind and rain behind him. The candlelight in Cheonghua restaurant was dim. His sleeves were fluttering in the wind. A flash of lightning suddenly flashed in the sky. His entire person was black and white like the background. At this moment, Shirkuizi suddenly felt that Li Yunxin did not look like a human. He looked more like a demon. It was also because of this bolt of lightning, and the words he had just said. I'll kill you when I'm done. Shirkuizi suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Sitting by the window and feeling the wind made her cold, but this cold came from her bones. Explaining these words to them now, was he going to make use of them too? He wouldn't even let a young man go. But this thought only appeared for a moment, before it was interrupted by Ling Kongzi's voice. Ah, this is a treasure of the secular world. Oh, not bad. Ling Kongzi looked at the painting for a while, and then sat up straight. Once she stood up, the others didn't dare to look anymore. Although they only saw a little bit, and didn't understand the true meaning, they could only leave. The steward beside Pei Juezi pulled the master to sit next to Ling Kongzi, and the others took their seats. When everyone was seated, Lu Laodao found his seat. He looked a little uneasy, and even reached out to wipe the sweat off his forehead. His seat was at the end, which was reasonable. However, what made him feel very uncomfortable was that he was being stared at by almost everyone. Xianqingzi stared at him, of course. The others also cast a few glances at him. Not to mention those wild Taoists by the window. They all had different expressions. When the master sat down, the servant walked over and served him. The little Taoist boy ran to Xianqingzi's side and whispered something. He looked a little hesitant. No matter how arrogant he was still a young man, and was easily influenced. At this moment, he was a little worried about Li Yunxin's harsh words. But when Xianqingzi heard this, his originally gloomy face suddenly broke into a faint smile. He glanced in the direction of Li Yunxin, then turned away from Lu Laodao, and started chatting cheerfully with the prefectural magistrate sitting next to him. Li Yunxin understood that this was because in the eyes of the artistic conception great painter, she and Lu Daoist were already dead. It wasn't worth any more attention. The storm was still raging. No one knew what was wrong with Pei Juzi today, but someone had to liven up the atmosphere. Xianqingzi had something on his mind, and his status was high enough. It was appropriate for his status to be in between the Taoist and the secular world. So he was duty-bound. He cleared his throat and said, I've also admired this fisherman fishing old man painting. It's an eye-opener for us. Fairy Ling Kong comes from an immortal sect, so her vision is naturally higher than us mortals. To be able to receive the word not bad from the fairy's mouth is already a blessing of 3 lifetimes. The others clapped their hands in agreement. Ling Kongzi's face was expressionless. He only nodded slightly, but this kind of attitude made everyone feel relaxed and happy. The scene gradually became lively. Someone else suggested composing a poem to record this event, and others agreed. The officials were all scholars and naturally loved this kind of thing. They were interested and said they wanted to write. Ling Kongzi watched them play for a while, and then looked at Li Yunxin. He found that he was talking to Lu Laodao about something. The expression on the old man's face changed. It was impossible to tell what he was feeling. After the officials recorded a few poems, Ling Kongzi said, The storm is a bit strong. Everyone was staring at the fairy's expression from beginning to end. Hearing her speak again, they hurriedly said, Yes, the storm is a bit strong. We should have a banquet, and drink some wine to warm our bodies. Fairy Ling Kong is a cultivator. Do you drink wine? There's no need for a banquet. I don't like those. As Ling Kongzi said that, he glanced at the cultivators by the window. Then he said, You guys are also suffering from the cold, take a rest. Saying so, he raised his hand and pressed it down. Just as everyone was about to carefully understand what Ling Kongzi meant by take a rest, they suddenly found that the entire world had become silent. Their ears were filled with the sound of wind and rain, and their bodies were buffeted by the moist wind. After Ling Kongzi finished speaking these words, the sound of wind and rain suddenly vanished. The wind also disappeared. The storm outside was still pouring, but no matter what, it couldn't enter the hall. After a moment of surprise, the hall was filled with praises. Most of these praises were sincere. The wild cultivators didn't think that Fairy Ling Kong would care about their feelings, and used her thaumaturgy to stop the wind and rain. She was truly merciful. But only Li Yunqin let out a soft cry of surprise. When Xian Qingzi mentioned the banquet, Ling Kongzi subconsciously glanced at the window. Li Yunqin felt that if his previous experience wasn't wrong, this was a related reaction. Because of the banquet, she looked at the window. There were two things by the window. One was a person, and the other was a fruit in front of the person. Li Yunqin couldn't clearly see the expression on Ling Kongzi's face, but he could see her neck. Her real face should be extremely fair, because the skin on her neck was white and delicate, without a single wrinkle or spot. Just now, the two sides of her smooth snow-white neck slightly tightened. It was an extremely imperceptible, swallowing movement. But just after that movement, it was forcefully suppressed. This might be Li Yunqin's illusion. But the tone of her voice after that was slightly lower, and she made a gesture to suppress it. When these three things were combined, it was very obvious that this Ling Kongzi was subconsciously suppressing her strong desire. And she stopped the wind and rain, just to explain her looking at the window action. She didn't need to show off like a secular person. If she really wanted to, why did she wait until now to pay attention to those cultivators who were suffering from the wind and cold? This Ling Kongzi, she lied. It wasn't that she didn't like the banquet, but she couldn't for some reason. Her performance was extraordinary, and she was definitely a cultivator different from mortals. But she actually told a small lie about this issue. So her image in Li Yunqin's mind became clearer. The wind in the hall disappeared, and Ling Kongzi said again, "Today, I came to the Baohua gathering for another matter." At this point, she straightened her upper body and glanced at the people in the hall. "I want to go through the tribulation of killing." As soon as she said this, everyone's reaction was interesting, but at the same time, it also made Li Yunqin a little shocked. Except for Pei Juezi and Lu Laodao, the expressions of the other 9 people changed slightly, and their emotions were extremely complicated. With just a glance, he realized, the people in the upper class of the city of Wei all knew. They all knew that the swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect kidnapped people, killed people, and went through the tribulation. Chapter 83. For a moment, they were afraid that Ling Kongzi was going to kill them to pass the heavenly tribulation. But then they realized that it was not possible, and they were worried that Ling Kongzi wanted them to find someone for her. That would be troublesome. Ling Kongzi also saw their expressions. At this moment, she finally smiled and said, "Are you afraid that I will kill someone? I won't." She ignored their shocked expressions and said, "Passing the heavenly tribulation by killing people is a stupid thing to do. After all, it's not that you have cut off the desire in your heart, but that you have to rely on external forces to solve the problem. Maybe you can reach the transcendent state that way. But if you want to go further, you will not be able to fool yourself. Some people feel tired of killing and don't want to kill anymore. That is the heavenly tribulation. But the real heavenly tribulation is not because you are tired of killing, but because you have let go of it. You are tired of it, and you don't want to touch it even if you want to. In essence, you care about it. And if you let go of it, you don't care about it. If you want to pick it up, you can pick it up. If you pick it up, you can put it down again. Then you have passed the heavenly tribulation. Unfortunately, among all the heavenly tribulations, the heavenly tribulation is the hardest to pass. I have studied the treasure scroll in my sect, but I was still lacking a little bit of understanding. Just this little bit of understanding made me unable to pass the heavenly tribulation for 3 years. Fellow Taoists in the city of Wei may not be as good as you want in terms of cultivation, but the things you have experienced and the feelings you have experienced must be unique. Today, there are a total of 36 painters here, with different levels of cultivation. But no matter how high or low, I want you to paint one for me. If one of them helps me, I will teach you a qi refinement mantra of the Langya cave as a token of appreciation. There was silence at first, and then there was an uproar. This was a heavenly blessing. What Taoist Ling Kong meant was that she did not care whether it was a treasure scroll, a rare scroll, a famous scroll, or a masterpiece, or just a painting with a little bit of spiritual qi in it. What she wanted was just a little bit of understanding. Indeed, every single person present had a chance. In front of such a blessing, the four painters of artistic conception couldn't hold back anymore. Dignity and modesty were always used at the right time. If he was still reserved at this time, he would be a true idiot. Xianqingzi coughed and said, Fairy Ling Kong's great blessing is really. I've really received your kindness. The bearing of an immortal. I, Xianqingzi, have lived for so long, and today, I have witnessed the bearing and mercy of an immortal. When he said this, everyone nodded in agreement. Since Fairy Ling Kong is like this, we must not let her down. He restrained his expression and said solemnly, Everyone here is a fellow Taoist. We are all aware of each other's realms. On this banquet, there are 5 painters of artistic conception from the city of Wei, including Lao Dao. Although the rest of you have not reached the state, you are all the masters of a monastery. You all have some skills. These fellow Taoists have indeed put in a lot of effort to create a masterpiece. Even if he didn't, you don't have to be too harsh on him. After all, he has been busy with worldly affairs all year round, and tonight is a stormy night. It's understandable that he didn't have enough strength. These words were well said, and the wild Taoists all nodded. Those at the peak of artistic conception could create a masterpiece. But how many people could do it? The 4 painters of artistic conception could only create 2 or 3 paintings in their lives. And they were already famous in the city of Wei. As for these wild Taoists, many of them couldn't even get close to a masterpiece. After all, they relied on incense money, and the money from selling paintings to make a living, just like Lu Laodao in the past. After saying this, several people at the banquet praised Xianqingzi for being fair. Then he changed the topic. As for the 5 of us, I'm not afraid that you will laugh at us, but we have been famous in the city of Wei for a long time. Everyone here, who hasn't heard of the 5 painters of artistic conception in the city of Wei, to be able to attend this banquet today, is the result of our fellow Taoists' appreciation. The people at the banquet smiled and nodded with different expressions. The wild Taoists were slightly silent. Then the 5 of us must work hard. Fairy Ling Kong has comprehended the treasure scroll, so we can't do it. As for the famous scroll, it depends on fate. But if the 5 of us can't make a masterpiece, Fairy, even if you don't blame us, we won't let it go easily. The prefectural magistrate and the prefectural magistrate are also here today. Today's Baohua gathering and Fairy Dongtian's blessing will be a big event that will be recorded in the prefectural history. Such a big event. Who dares not to do their best? Even I won't let him go. Since the beginning of the banquet, the prefectural magistrate of the city of Wei, who had been serious in speech and manner, finally spoke. The highest official in the city of Wei, who had administrative, military, and judicial powers in one body, spoke. Xianqingzi nodded and finished the banquet with satisfaction. The little Taoist boy beside him glanced at Li Yunqin. Even the slowest person would know what was going to happen. Sherqueezy didn't know what she was feeling at the moment. She thought, was it really like this? That kid was right. But she wasn't sure whether she should worry about Lu Laodao or others. She saw Li Yunqin whispering to Laodao. She didn't know what they said. But Lu Laodao didn't panic. At least he didn't look panicked. Instead, Li Yunqin turned his head and smiled at her helplessly. Sherqueezy understood what he meant. Look, they're starting to court death. But she didn't know how Li Yunqin could do it. Xianqingzi and the others at the banquet were all on good terms. They laid the groundwork bit by bit, forcing Lao Dao and him into a corner. Maybe the 2 of them could make a masterpiece and escape this disaster. But kill them? She couldn't think of how Li Yunqin would do it. How to turn the situation around bit by bit and achieve that point. After the prefectural magistrate spoke, the atmosphere in the hall became a little somber. Xianqingzi said again, serve the brush and ink. But when painters painted, they all had their own tools, so it wasn't good to change tools randomly, because when one thing was used for a long time, it would become handy, and it would be easier to inject spiritual aura into it. The wild Taoists came to the banquet, but in fact, not many of them would think of such a thing, so not many of them brought their painting tools. As for Lu Laodao, he couldn't paint out of thin air, and he knew that his brother Xian was by his side, so he wouldn't bring his painting tools. In the end, most of the painters in the secular world treated painting as a way to make a living, and the painting Taoists treated it as a way to cultivate and save their lives. Therefore, like the Taoists and the swordsmen, their painting tools were always with them like magic tools. After all, the four painters of artistic conception had cultivated to the artistic conception level, so they could be regarded as the top figures in the secular world. They also had servants by their side, so the painting tools were handed over to the servants. When he gave the order, the servants would serve the tools to their masters. As for the wild Taoists, the servants of Qionghua building walked to the front, took the fruit platter, and served them the brush and ink prepared by the building. In such a place, there would often be people who wanted to write poems when they were half drunk. Therefore, it was necessary to always have brush and ink. Xian Qingzi saw that the table in front of Lu Laodao was still empty, so he asked in surprise, "Fellow Taoist Han Yuanzi, why didn't you prepare it?" Chapter 84. Lu Laodao stammered for a while, then said, Laodao, I injured my hand the day before yesterday." Xian Qingzi and everyone else cast their gazes on Lu Laodao's hands. Although those hands were not good-looking, nor could they be considered delicate, they were whole, without a single wound. Xian Qingzi laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. How does this look like an injured hand?" "Master, it's an internal injury." Li Yunxin knelt beside Lu Laodao and said sadly, "Previously, my master encountered a dog on the street. That dog barked at my master. My master ignored him, but that dog still barked. My master rewarded him with a slap, and in the end, his hand was injured." He then looked at Ling Kongzi. This is truly a sad story. His tone and mannerisms were serious, but they were also a little jumpy. Xian Qingzi's expression turned cold, and he was about to flare up. However, Ling Kongzi laughed softly. "Fine. Interesting. Then don't do it for him." Hearing Ling Kongzi say this, the eyes of everyone at the banquet dimmed. But when they heard her next words, their eyes lit up again. Ling Kongzi pointed at Li Yunxin. "You do the killing intent. If you do, I'll agree to one of your requests. If you can't, I'll make things difficult for you." Li Yunxin blinked, appearing very troubled. "This kind of rare scroll is very difficult." Xian Qingzi hurriedly straightened his face and coughed. No, he was going to laugh. He was laughing at this kid. He was used to being naughty and mischievous in the marketplace, and he followed that Lu Laodao, so he had not seen the world. How could he smile mischievously and roll on the ground and act obedient in this kind of situation? What kind of expert was Fairy Ling Kong? Seeing how he had no respect for his elders, and how he did not care about his status and etiquette at the banquet, how could she not be angry? Right now it was obvious. A rare scroll. He himself, Xian Qingzi, might not be able to create a rare scroll in his lifetime, and that Lu Laodao was even less capable, much less a little Taoist boy like him. He leaned forward slightly and said to the prefectural magistrate, "The fairy is angry." "Yes." The prefectural magistrate frowned. He glanced at Lu Laodao and Li Yunxin. "You old thing. You wanted to vent your anger, but you ended up angering that expert. Be careful not to take it out on him." Xian Qingzi smiled. "I know what I'm doing, but we can't let these two walk out of this building unscathed. That Laodao usually uses our name to swindle people. Seeing that he's just a poor man trying to make a living, I don't care about it. Today this brat really doesn't know life from death. If I don't get rid of this kid, I won't be able to get rid of the hatred in my heart. When he grows up, he will definitely be a disaster." The magistrate waved his hand dismissively. "It's been more than 10 years, but you're still so impatient." "But if that's the case, why did he come to this banquet? Qianqingzi smiled disdainfully. Previously, I also thought of this, so I didn't bother with him. I'm afraid he has a secret background that we never knew about. Today, seeing him like this, seeing that Pei Juzi again, do you not understand? It's a pity that the first grandson of the nation's master, Dao Meizi, is like this. Look at him now at that banquet, his face is a fool. I heard that he only has female charms. Last night at Gathering Guild, that Miss Huxin. Miss Huxin is him? Isn't that so? She spent the night with him, and then she suddenly died. This Pei Juzi. One look, and we know he's a good-for-nothing. He must have heard some common folk joke about the 5 concepts and treated it as the truth. Really AI. Hearing his words, the prefectural magistrate glared, his heart pained. He muttered, AI, it's my fault. I wanted to take the Huxin long ago. AI. The two of them whispered to each other, then looked at Ling Kongzi, only to find that the fairy was looking at Li Yunxin and didn't make a sound. They could see her face, but they couldn't see her face clearly. They all thought that it was an immortal's method to cover her face. Thus, they thought that this immortal was truly angry and was about to send down lightning. On this side, the fairy indicated that she wanted the little Taoist boy to paint on behalf of her master. So someone also brought up brush and ink. Normal brush and ink, normal paper. Even if the 4 concept painters used these tools, their works would be discounted, let alone this Taoist boy. Qianqingzi's heart was clear, and he felt comfortable all over. After the Taoist boy put a paperweight on him, he cupped his hands towards Ling Kongzi. Fairy Lao Dao, I heard the murderous sound of the wind and rain just now, and I actually heard a bit of murderous intent. A few days ago, I saw General Pei's formation breaking diagram, and now I have some understanding. Lao Dao, I will paint a painting for you, the murderous night rain painting. Ling Kongzi didn't say anything, and only nodded slightly. Qianqingzi said so much, and it had already attracted everyone's attention. Although the wild Taoists sympathized with Lu Lao Dao, and didn't like Qianqingzi's way of doing things, they knew that he had real skills. Watching a concept painter paint would also benefit a lot, so they all held their breath and looked at him. They saw that Qianqingzi first dipped a large brush into the thick ink, and with a smack, he threw it on the paper. A big ball of ink was thrown out. This move shocked everyone. What was he doing? They saw him smile unhurriedly, and then he took out another brush, dipped it in the clear water, and in that ball of thick ink, the brush moved like dragons and snakes, wildly dancing in the air. Then he raised his hand and threw the brush to the ground, stood up, took a deep breath, and blew at that ball of ink. He raised his hand and lifted the painting from the mat. At this time, when people saw this painting again, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The ball of thick ink he had splashed on earlier, because of the water halo, had already become thick and well-proportioned. It had turned into a ball of rolling rain clouds. And in this ball of rain clouds, there were 2 ink dragons, entangled and fighting, and only a few claws and scales were revealed. This painting could be drawn by ordinary people, but to use this kind of painting technique, it was really at the level of a master. What a good murderous night rain painting. Another master painter cheered on the spot. This sentence indeed wasn't flattery, but because once this painting was completed, people with a little bit of skill could see. This was a famous painting. The 2 dragons fought in that rain cloud, although the head and tail couldn't be seen, but they could feel the murderous intent in this painting. This Qianqingzi actually made the 3rd famous painting in his life tonight. Even Lu Laodao's expression changed. Although they were opponents, he also had the heart of painting Dao. How good would it be if he could also make this painting? Li Yunxin looked at Qianqingzi's heroic appearance with a grin, and hurriedly clapped his hands. Great! At this time, Qianqingzi handed the painting to the servant to take, and with a face full of self-satisfaction and pride, he turned to him. Little Taoist boy, you boasted to me before. Now with Fairy Ling Kong on top, it's time for you to make a move and let us see, right? Li Yunxin smiled. I know there are some carefree times in life, but they are very rare. For example, now, you had an orgasm in front of the fairy, and now the aftertaste hasn't ended. It's very comfortable. I originally wanted to let you be happy for a while longer. Then you can't wait to court death. Okay. I'll do it too. I'll do one. Perverted eating painting. Chapter 85. When he said the name, everyone was puzzled. They might not know the word pervert very well, but they knew the word eat. But how could it be used here? For example, hunting in Autumn Mountain was not called hunting in Autumn Mountain. King enjoying himself was not called king playing. The word eating was really vulgar to be used here. Even those unruly Taoists frowned. This little Taoist boy was so confident earlier. Even if he could not create a rare scroll and escape the punishment, he should not embarrass Hunyuanzi Lao Dao. At this moment, Xianqingzi became more relaxed and magnanimous. Oh, then let us see your... As he spoke, he turned to look at the people in the audience and smiled. Pervert eating while eating? Everyone burst into laughter. Lao Dao moved away from the table and said in a low voice, "Brother Xian." Li Yunxin smiled. "What's there to be afraid of?" Then, under everyone's mocking gaze, he knelt in front of the table and spread out the rice paper. He spread out the paper and chose a small weasel brush from the brush holder. Then, he looked at the paint on the table and frowned slightly. Where are the rouge and vine yellow colors?" Xianqingzi smiled and said, "Why don't you make an ink painting? It will save some effort." Li Yunxin spread out his hands and said sincerely, "To be honest, what I want to draw is not colored. You don't know what it is." Hearing what he said, some people were worried while others were happy. A brilliant painter could draw vivid and lifelike even if he used ink, like Xianqingzi did just now. He would definitely not know what it is. Hearing what he said, he was more like a child who had just learned to draw. Only Lu Laodao was slightly relieved, because he realized that Brother Xian. He was playing again. He had seen Brother Xian's painting of Crown Prince Jia, one who had achieved great success. That painting skill was definitely not inferior to Xianqingzi's. Brother Xian was good in every way. He just liked to tease people. As he teased and teased, he died from the teasing. Amidst the laughter, a manservant gave him two different looks. Li Yunxin dipped the brush into the ink and drew an oval plate on the paper. He hooked a piece of what appeared to be meat on the plate. Then, next to the piece of meat, he added a cauliflower, 2 beans, and a few fruits. At this point, no one was talking or laughing. She was shocked by him. The thing he drew, on such an occasion. Did he think he was a child learning how to draw? How dare he do this in front of Fairy Ling Kong? Everyone was shocked to the point no one noticed that Ling Kongzi, who sat at the head, had imperceptibly straightened his back. She widened her eyes slightly and looked at the thing that Li Yunxin had drawn. She looked at him, looked at that thing, and looked at him again. It was a rare loss of composure. Under such a gaze, Li Yunxin added another knife to the left of the plate. On the right he added a fork. And at this time, his expression also gradually became solemn. No longer relaxed, mischievous, and cynical. It became somewhat gloomy. Finished with these outlines, he stopped his brush. He placed the brush on the brush holder and picked up a white cloud. He used rouge and gamboge to adjust the color of the meat and colored the piece on the plate. It was really a piece of meat. Then, he painted other colors in turn. Green cauliflower, beans, and a few red fruits. Then, he used a bright dawn red color to glow the broth. Finally, he put down his brush and slightly closed his eyes for a while before opening them again and laughing. Good. Pervert, a painting of eating. After a brief silence, Xianqingzi laughed in extreme anger and said softly, "This is the painting that you want to offer to Fairy Ling Kong?" "Yes. Fairy Ling Kong wants to transcend the killing tribulation and seek killing intent." "And you made this killing intent?" "Yes." "Hee. You have a lot of guts." Xianqingzi glared at him, reaching out to tear this painting to pieces. "From this painting, I don't sense a shred of killing intent. Who among you can?" When the time came, this great painter would be truly enraged. He only thought that in the past, Li Yunxin was extremely naughty and mischievous. But he didn't expect that looking at it now, besides naughty and mischievous, there was also stupidity. At this time, he actually used this method to throw a tantrum. He really wholeheartedly sought death. No one said anything. Indeed, no one could. Even the highest concept cultivation couldn't sense a shred of killing intent from this painting. As for this painting, rather than saying it was a painting, it really might as well be called a graffiti. In this silence, he saw Ling Kongzi walk over. If people's eyes weren't mistaken, right now, he saw that fairy Ling Kong's fingertips that stretched towards the table, attempting to pick up that painting, were faintly trembling. She picked up this painting and held it in her hands, carefully looking at it for a good while. Then, like Li Yunxin, she closed her eyes and opened them again. Xian Qingzi knew that this time, the fairy was also extremely angry. He was even more afraid that the fairy would be so angry that she would forget what she had just said. So he sneered and said, "Fairy above. Fairy, please understand this painting, is it a rare scroll?" Ling Kongzi was silent for a while, then looked at him with a strange gaze, then looked at Li Yunxin. "It's not a rare scroll." A hint of a smile appeared on Xian Qingzi's lips. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a sentence that made him suspect that he was in a dream. "It's a rare scroll." When they heard these words, when no one was able to figure out exactly what it meant, Ling Kongzi had already lightly shook the painting of a freak eating. There was a buzzing sound. Ling Kongzi's clothes, which didn't have the slightest ripple even in the howling wind and rain, actually seemed as if they were blown by a violent gale, and they clattered tightly to his body. It was tangible. Violent killing intent. In an instant, it swept through the entire hall. It was precisely this tremble that besides Li Yunxin and Ling Kongzi, everyone else was shocked by the killing intent to the point of falling to the ground. And they felt that all the feelings of terror, darkness, hatred and brutality in the world had charged into their minds like a tidal wave at that moment, causing them to almost lose their minds and fall unconscious on the spot. At this time, Ling Kongzi seemed to be muttering to himself, "With your realm, of course you can't understand the killing intent here. If you really did, you would also die on the spot. My killing tribulation, it has already passed." Then, she placed this precious painting on the table again, and knelt in front of Li Yunxin. She looked at the clear and bright eyes of this youth, and asked softly, "You must have also passed the killing tribulation. That's why you made such a rare scroll. How did you pass the killing tribulation?" Li Yunxin smiled faintly, personal privacy, no comment. "I know, using a painting to carry the Tao. But why did you clearly draw food? But why did you give birth to killing intent? That's also personal." Ling Kongzi was silent for a while. Then he asked again, "That person, is he still in this world?" Li Yunxin tilted his head and thought for a while. "Who is he?" Ling Kongzi's voice reached his ears, and he knew that only he could hear it. "The art saint." He sighed and said sincerely, "I don't know." Ling Kongzi frowned slightly. "But clearly in this world, there can't be a second person who can draw like him." Li Yunxin thought again and smiled. "Let's not talk about this first. Do you think I'm more interesting now?" Ling Kongzi was slightly stunned, and then answered, "Yes." "Then do me a favor. I will tell you more interesting things." Li Yunxin stood up and looked at Pei Juzi, whose eyes were rolling around. "There's a ghost in this room." Chapter 86. Li Yunxin's words were full of lies and lies. Therefore, when he said, "There's a ghost in this house," no one was surprised by the fact that there was a ghost, because Li Yunxin himself was enough to subvert all their knowledge. Isn't he? Shirkuizi was overwhelmed by the murderous aura just now. At this moment, she was leaning against the railing of the building. Her head was still buzzing, as if she had really experienced a life and death crisis. Isn't he just a teenager? This was probably the question that everyone wanted to ask, including Lu Laodao. He knew that Brother Xian's background was mysterious and unfathomable, but he was still a teenager. Although many people would think that he was 18 or 19 years old when they saw his figure. But Lu Laodao knew that Li Yunxin's real age was, in 3 months, he would be 15 years old. It could be said that he was gifted. Li Yunxin was indeed worthy of this evaluation. Therefore, under the guidance of a master, his cultivation progress was rapid. It could also be said that he came from a rich and powerful sect, and had seen a lot of things. Therefore, he developed a calm temperament. Furthermore, because of his extraordinary intelligence, everything was under his careful planning and strategizing. But these things couldn't make up for the flaw brought by his age, his lack of experience. And the thing corresponding to this experience was tribulation. A young man had heard a lot of tricks about the ways of the world, and understood a lot of things, and the key points in all kinds of things. But there were a lot of things that he hadn't experienced personally, so he couldn't understand them. Without this understanding, the tribulation wouldn't come. It was like a teenager read a lot of books and understood a lot of that thing between adult men and women. He even saw someone demonstrate it for him. But no matter how much he understood, he didn't experience it himself. He didn't know what that feeling was. He didn't know what this feeling was. Even if one day, someone gave him such a precious scroll and asked him to immerse himself in it, he would probably have to go through divine tribulation. But it would be a fake divine tribulation like Huai Nanzi and Pun Nanzi. But now, he had created a treasure scroll. That kind of violent and terrifying killing intent had already exceeded the limits of what anyone present could endure and understand. No one could imagine. What exactly had Li Yunxin experienced in the short span of a dozen or so years that he was able to overcome the killing calamity? Moreover, he had such a deep understanding of killing intent. Furthermore, what they found even more unbelievable was a treasure scroll. In this secular world, there was no such thing as a treasure scroll. Even in heavenly caves and sects, treasure scrolls were rare treasures. Above the treasure scrolls were spiritual maps, but there were only a few spiritual maps that had been passed down. Moreover, it was such a treasured scroll that was brimming with killing intent. Either that, or Li Yunxin had experienced a rather long life filled with slaughter and blood, or he had reached the peak of the transcendent state and was able to create a treasure scroll. According to Ling Kongzi's experience, she could think of the latter point. But for Lu Laodao, Shirkuizi, Xianqingzi, and those unruly Taoists, neither point was something they could think of or accept. Thus at this moment, the astonishment in Xianqingzi's heart had already far surpassed his terror. It was to the extent that he just sat on the ground and stared fixedly at Li Yunxin, unable to say a single word as he looked at her and Ling Kongzi, sitting and answering each other. What was the identity of this young man? How could he speak like that to the head disciple of Langye Heavenly Cave? At this moment, when he looked at Li Yunxin again, his mind was almost completely taken away by what had just happened. He only felt that every word, every action, and every look of his had a deep meaning. He even felt that he had seen something, devil qi, purple qi, or whatever it was surrounding him. This Xianqingzi, because he knew a lot and had a deep understanding, was finally shocked to the extreme by what had just happened. He had lost his mind. On the contrary, the little Taoist boy beside him only knew a little about these things. He only knew that the seemingly ordinary young man had done something earth-shattering, and he was not nearly shocked to death like Xianqingzi. He got up stealthily and slowly crawled through the crowd with his hands and feet, planning to slip down the stairs. But when he was about to reach the stairs, he heard Li Yunxin say, "Hey, the one over there, the one from the Yu clan, don't go. You want to run after showing off? You really know how to *king play with excitement." The little Taoist boy's body slightly stiffened, and he broke out in a cold sweat. He gritted his teeth and slowly turned his head to look. As expected, Li Yunxin was looking at him. He saw Li Yunxin waving his hand at him. "You come." At this moment, almost no one spoke for him. This little Taoist boy had seen the world, and he knew that it was best to be obedient at this time, not to make people more irritated. So he walked over without saying a word. His heart slightly moved, and he pretended to be neither servile nor overbearing. His eyes were slightly lowered, but it did not look like he was going to lower his head and admit his guilt. Unfortunately, Li Yunxin did not care about his expression. He was pretending to be blind. But he heard that Ling Kongzi was talking to Li Yunxin at this moment. The latter was distracted when talking to this fairy, and stopped him. "I said I promised you one thing. Is that all you want?" Ling Kongzi looked at him seriously, and did not look at Pei Juzi. "Catching ghosts. What else could it be? Do you know why I came to the city of Wei? Ling Kongzi looked into Li Yunxin's eyes. If I'm right, it's meaningless. If I'm wrong, I might be cheated. So I'm not going to say it. Ling Kongzi sighed. You don't have to be like this. You have a treasure in your hand. I came for that treasure. I couldn't find you at first, but I knew that 3 cultivators had died, so I followed them all the way here. And then I found another surprise. You have to know, I originally wanted to take you back to the mountain, but I said before that I promised to do one thing for you, and I will definitely keep my promise. This is also a part of my cultivation. So now your request, is it really to catch the Ghost King? Also, why don't you try to escape? Li Yunxin was originally sitting upright, but now, after listening to her words, his whole body suddenly became relaxed, as if he had given up on something. He shook his head and sighed. His voice became helpless and low, as if he had made up his mind, but still felt uncertain and extremely painful. Do you remember what I said to you when we first met? Li Yunxin's eyes seemed to be filled with sorrow and exhaustion, like a martyr who had walked thousands of miles and finally gave up on his ideals. You, Ling Kongzi sensed Li Yunxin's strangeness. She frowned slightly, not knowing why he suddenly became so depressed. You mean communism? Not only Ling Kongzi felt that he had lost his strength, but other people, as long as they were good at observing people's words and expressions, would also think so. But there was only one person, only Lu Laodao. He recovered from the impact of the killing intent just now, and seeing Li Yunxin like this, his heart skipped a beat. Brother Xi and you, why are you up to mischief again? This is the brilliant disciple of the Lord of the Dongtian. Chapter 87. Yes, communism. Li Yunxin nodded his head. After saying that, he was silent for a while. Ling Kongzi was a cultivator, and a cultivator's observation skills were always sharper than ordinary people's. Therefore, he could see Li Yunxin's chest rising and falling. His breathing rate was normal, but his shoulders were obviously pressing down. He was trying hard to adjust his breathing, and he was trying to suppress some kind of emotion. Then, he raised his head again and waved at the little Taoist boy who was standing obediently beside him. Wine! The little Taoist boy was stunned for a while. He looked at Ling Kongzi, and then at his master. But Xian Qingzi was in a daze. He kept mumbling something, and did not pay attention to him. The little Taoist boy looked at the magistrate again. The magistrate and the officials had lost their dignity just now. At this time, they barely calmed down and straightened themselves behind the table. They were all smart people, and naturally knew that the young man was an old acquaintance of Ling Kongzi. Not only was he an old acquaintance, but he was also being chased by her. But at this time, no one would be stupid enough to pick a side. Ling Kongzi came from the Lengya Grotto heaven, and in the eyes of the ordinary people, she was indeed very high. But that young man could actually talk to her like this. How could he be a simple person? It seemed that they could not afford to offend either of them. If it was possible, they wanted to run away. So at this time, the magistrate closed his eyes slightly and ignored him. Seeing this situation, the little Taoist boy carefully walked a few steps away, took a pot of wine from the table in front of the wild Taoists by the window, and handed it to Li Yunxin with both hands. Li Yunxin took the wine pot, lifted it up high, and poured it into his mouth. When a line of wine entered his throat, he put the pot on the table and looked at Ling Kongzi. You are a cultivator. You seek the great Tao, seek longevity, and now you have reached the transcendent state. Why? Ling Kongzi didn't even give it a thought before answering. Cultivating the Tao and cultivating to immortality is a great fortune that people yearn for, but are unable to obtain. What do you mean by why? Li Yunxin smiled and waved his hand. If I were to guess, you left the Lengya Grotto heaven and came to this world and saw many things. Every time he saw something, he found it more interesting. You will slowly discover that there are still so many interesting things and interesting people in this world. But you, another thought in your heart is telling you that these things are just fleeting clouds, and only the path of immortality is fundamental. Now these two thoughts are slowly fighting fiercely in your heart. You are gradually feeling the pain, aren't you? After listening to his words, Ling Kongzi pondered for a moment. Although I don't know why you are saying this, no. I've long known that the greater thousand worlds are more interesting than the lesser thousand worlds, but this thought doesn't make me feel any pain. This is the scariest thing. Li Yunxin sighed. The thought is in your mind, but you don't face it. It's not even that you force yourself not to look at it. It's that another consciousness in your heart doesn't want you to look at it. I used to be just like you. Since you are looking for the treasure, you should know that I have lived in seclusion since I was a child. So I have seen many things, and many demons. After seeing them, I know that there are good and bad. And I also know that it is natural for demons to exist in this world. Demons harm people because they don't have a sense of right and wrong. Just like humans harm chickens, ducks, pigs, and dogs, to them, we are also demons. Some great demons have many devotees, and will only grow stronger. Therefore, I thought that if one day, these great fiendish demons reach an unimaginable level of strength, to the point where no cultivator in the world can stop them, what should we do? So I thought, why should humans and demons be enemies? Why can't we educate them, accept them, and let them become a part of us? We are humans, and they are not humans, but they are still humans. When Li Yunxin said this, his expression became more and more serious, as if he was completely immersed in his own world of theory. When the others heard his words, they were all dumbfounded. The things these two were talking about, compared to them, it was a completely different world, so they could only listen attentively. Your idea is somewhat reasonable, but it is not the right time. Ling Kongzi listened for a while, and couldn't help but refute. There are many things that are one thing to say, and another thing to do. Accepting the demons may be like what you said about the great harmony of the world, but it is more likely that they will learn profound Tao, and the demons will gain power. Once this happens, the world will be in danger. In the long run, it is better to suppress them when they are weak. When Lu Laodao heard Ling Kongzi's words, he finally couldn't help but sigh. He didn't stay by Li Yunxin's side for a long time, but Li Yunxin rarely hid anything from him, and even intentionally taught him about the study of heart. So Lu Laodao knew that this fairy Ling Kong was gradually jumping into a very simple trap. When Brother Xian spoke, his expression and attitude were very sincere, and it was very easy for people to believe him. Then, there would be some flaws in his speech. The people listening to him might not care much about his point of view. But even so, when they heard the obvious flaws, they couldn't help but try to correct and refute. This was like a piece of cotton cloth placed by the water. If it didn't touch the water, it would always be dry. But even if a corner of it was wet, it was hard to say how much water would be absorbed. She only needed to listen to a point of view, and maybe she could always look at it objectively and rationally. However, once she couldn't help but refute, she would have to think deeply. According to Brother Xian's words, this was the first step of self-hypnosis. Fairy Ling Kong fell into the water. He believed that Brother Xian must have a lot of tricks, such as his understanding of this Ling Kongzi. But Lao Dao felt that he didn't disappoint Brother Xian's teaching by being able to see this level. At this time, Lao Dao had become the third calmest person in this building. He wanted to see what Brother Xian was going to do. So it's still the same question. Hearing her words, Li Yunxin didn't get angry. Instead, there was a sad smile on his face. In the first place, he was a rare handsome man, and Ling Kongzi felt that he was rather interesting. At this moment, seeing him smiling so sadly, and thinking of his previous confident look, she suddenly felt a bit of sorrow and pity for him. Why do you want to cultivate? Cultivation runs through your life for years, decades. If one day you find out that it's just a bubble, that cultivation won't lead to immortality and immortality, what will you do? It's like I've spent so many years thinking about this world where humans and demons coexist in harmony, but in the end I found out. It's just like what you said. My previous thinking was stupid and inappropriate. He threw away the empty wine pot inside. I boast that I'm smarter than others, but I've always neglected a problem. For a change, the old aristocratic class is the biggest obstacle. And my previous mistake was that I wanted to initiate a top-down reform. But now I realize that if we don't clean up those rotten and backward big demons, they won't walk into the garbage dump of history. Chapter 88. Hearing his words, Ling Kongzi's voice suddenly changed. So, you know the second reason why I came to City of Wei. Of course Li Yunqin didn't know, but his expression didn't change. Of course I know. Otherwise, why do you think I did so much today? I was also preparing for that thing. Preparing? What you did today? Yes. You asked me why I didn't try to escape. Now you should know why. He lied without changing his expression. If someone put his hand on his chest, he would find that his heart didn't even beat too fast. Ling Kongzi was silent for a while. Then he said, "So, you are going to help me. But everything you have done before will be in vain. Can you let it go?" Ling Kongzi thought he knew what Li Yunqin was talking about. But Li Yunqin didn't know what Ling Kongzi was talking about. He had too many secrets. Any one of them would probably match Ling Kongzi's words. So he used his trump card. Ling Kongzi, this woman, used a magic weapon to cover her face. Most people who did this had a strong sense of self-protection. This kind of mentality would never be formed in a happy environment. According to his experience, people who were like this after adulthood either suffered from long-term domestic violence when they were young, or came from a single-parent family and lacked a sense of security. Most of these people also liked to suppress their desires and see curiosity as a scourge. But this kind of human nature could only be suppressed, but it was absolutely difficult to eradicate. Once it was provoked at the right time, it would erupt more strongly than ordinary people. He had seen too many people like this in his previous life. They usually looked aloof and indifferent, but often for a person or something, they would show perseverance and endless enthusiasm that ordinary people couldn't achieve. In view of these two encounters, he had formed an image of this fairy Ling Kong in his heart. He sighed and slightly raised his head. His eyes looked sad and blurred, but there was a kind of pure and clear persistent emotion. He opened his mouth slightly. His lips, which had become redder from the alcohol, were trembling slightly. Then, he leaned forward slightly and took a deep breath after a short, well-timed gaze. His breath trembled a little. It seemed that he was suppressing some strong emotion, which made his voice tremble slightly. But this trembling made him look even more affectionate, and his words also seemed to come from the bottom of his heart. "For you, I can give up the whole world." After a second of silence, Ling Kongzi leaned back slightly, raised his hand, and pointed at Li Yunqin's throat. His voice became a little sharp because of his excitement, and he sounded like a junior high school girl whose braid had just been pulled. "You, what are you talking about?" The reactions of the others were actually not much better than hers. Most of them were in a slightly dazed state. What the hell? On such a stormy night, the head disciple of the Langya cave master had encountered a powerful enemy of unknown identity that he had been searching for all this time. In the end, he actually confessed to her? What kind of play was this? Lu Laodao was dumbfounded. He had thought of 100 ways that Brother Xian might have used, but he had never thought that he would actually do this. She pressed against Li Yunqin's throat, but his face did not show any panic. He just stared straight at Ling Kongzi's face. After 3 seconds, he suddenly laughed bitterly, turned his face away, and shook his head. "Just take it as I was talking nonsense. This kind of thing. In fact, I don't believe it myself." He turned his face slightly and looked at Ling Kongzi sadly, but he had already avoided her fingers. "Do you know the first time I saw you? When I first saw you, I couldn't tell if you were good-looking or not. I also didn't know what kind of character you had. I was doing something bad, but you caught me doing it. I was so disgusted with you. Where did this hateful woman come from, coming to my house in broad daylight? What are you trying to do?" "You." Ling Kongzi's heart slightly sank. She did not know why she was disappointed, but she was somewhat disappointed. To hell with it. Then, she heard Li Yunqin say, "But later, I told you about communism. I thought about it alone for many years and came up with it. Others would not have the patience to listen to me. But you, all these years, the only one who listened to me." I think you probably don't understand my feelings at that time. For many, many years. After many, many years, there was suddenly a person who made me feel. So this person really exists. This person really can understand what I'm thinking, really, is the person I've been looking for in my heart. He sighed slightly, reaching out his hand to the perverted eating picture on the table and gently stroked it. As he said those passionate words, Ling Kongzi's eyes flickered, and she did not want to look at his eyes. At that moment, he seemingly subconsciously made some noise on the table. Naturally, Ling Kongzi came to look at the picture. Looking at the picture, she was slightly stunned for a moment. It was at this moment that Li Yunxin was completely sure of one thing. So he finally smiled and said softly, "Actually, I am very lonely." This sentence was like a curse. After saying this, Ling Kongzi's hand trembled slightly, and she finally put it down. She suddenly experienced the first confession in her life, and it happened in such an era and such an occasion. Even as a cultivator, her heart was in chaos. Then, after listening to Li Yunxin's words, hearing those words from a person she did not hate, her heart was suddenly lost, and then slightly relieved. She had long lost her calm mood. It was in this state that he was guided until he heard the last sentence. So her body slightly straightened, but soon relaxed again. She panted slightly twice and finally said in a low voice, "I understand." At this time, everyone was dumbfounded, because no matter what, they could not figure out what had happened. Why did it become like this? But in Li Yunxin's heart, there was already a sneer. This woman was in his hands. He had already grasped something important in her heart. At this moment, he had already become her demon in her heart. She was a young woman, full of repressed curiosity. Even as a transcendent state cultivator, she was still filled with a strong sense of vigilance when she came to the mortal world. After seeing the pervert eating picture, the first question she asked was whether the art saint was still in this world. At that time, although Li Yunxin could not see her expression, if he could not hear the strong feelings this young girl had for the art saint from her voice and tone, he would really be a deaf person. A soft-hearted but slightly paranoid girl fell in love with a legendary figure. This feeling was destined to not be told to others. Today, she met a young man who seemed to be equally interesting. First, she was confessed to, and then she heard the same story from the young man's words. If it was an ordinary person, she could force herself to grit her teeth and ignore it. But if it was an ordinary person, why would he have feelings for the art saint? So, she was moved by her own sense of identity, and the same sense of loneliness. She felt that she had met her own kind, in a sense the same kind. From the moment this matter had happened, the outcome was already decided. This girl who was full of romantic self-destruction, Ling Kongzi had developed a strong sense of sympathy and identity for Li Yunxin. For a young girl who had not experienced the world, under the guidance of a demon like Li Yunxin, it was difficult for her to realize who and why the complicated and turbulent feelings in her heart were at this moment. And it was even easier to mistake these feelings of sympathy and identity for, this was love. So on this rainy night, this fairy Ling Kongzi, she had just passed the tribulation of killing, and now she was in the tribulation of love. So, Li Yunxin smiled and said, "I also hope that you will understand. Then why did you come here?" Ling Kongzi, whose heart had already been thrown into disarray, did not even give it a second thought before he answered. Even though his voice sounded like it had already regained its calmness, and he had once again straightened his back. "What I understand are those ideals that you spoke of. It's not something else. You are an interesting person." After that day, I carefully thought about what you said. So, I know that what you said before should not be false. The theory of communism, if you made it up on the spot to deceive me, you could not have said it so carefully. In my opinion, if you thought about these things by yourself, you probably could not have come up with it without 5 or 6 years. So, I understand and believe you on this point. So now, what are you going to do? I want to get rid of that dragon, son. What are you going to do? In fact, Everything that Li Yunxin had built tonight was built on a foundation. He had told Ling Kongzi about his ideal. Although the so-called transvestite communism was just a nonsense he had made up to deceive her when he first met her. But no matter how this theory was criticized, despised, or pursued at that time, after all, it was also a person who had spent decades of effort to come up with it. Just because a smart person like Ling Kongzi could see this point, she took it for granted that Li Yunxin had really spent so much time and effort on this idea. Based on such a premise and foundation, the following words, the words of despair and disappointment, would make him believe Li Yunxin's frustration and desolation even more. Just like what he said, if one day he found out that the path of immortality he had been cultivating was nothing, what kind of pain would it be? She no longer doubted, or rather, she no longer doubted. Finally, she said her purpose: to get rid of Dragon Sun. Li Yunxin was slightly stunned in his heart. This woman wanted to get rid of the 9th young master. So this was her other purpose. Damn it. If he had known this, he would not have spent so much effort on her. Wasn't it to provoke her to fight with that demon, so that he could benefit from it and escape unscathed? But this kind of surprise was better than nothing. He smiled. You should know what I would do. The big demon I mentioned just now was referring to him. He and I used to be friends. Li Yunxin smiled bitterly. I used to try to do what I wanted to do through him. But gradually I realized that he was not a good candidate. He killed 2 swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect and Huainanzi. I wanted to live in seclusion in the city of Wei, but he killed Li Yaoxi. Hearing this, the magistrate and the other 3 prefectural magistrates all opened their eyes wide. This matter was related to them. His temperament was too surly. Many times he would suddenly become a beast. Even as a friend, he didn't recognize him. Li Yunxin shook his head slightly, seeming to be distressed. I had planned to use the Jade Slip of Enlightenment to do something more meaningful. But he knew it and took it away. At this point, I had to break up with him. That's why you saw what I did in the Qiao family. I wanted to start with those small demons. I thought that since the big demons were brutal, I should get rid of them. Many of those small demons were doing good things. There are so many temple attendants in this building, and most of the people in the temples are worshipping those demons. The Jade Slip of Enlightenment is really in your hands. Ling Kongzi was a little stunned and sighed in a low voice. It's not in my hands now. You shouldn't have touched it. Alas. Ling Kongzi still shook his head. She thought for a while and said in a low voice, after I get rid of Long Sun, you go back to the mountain with me. Li Yunxin thought for a while and took a risk to ask a question. Why do you want that jade slip? I mean, how important is that thing? Ling Kongzi was silent for a while. She slowly raised her hand and hung it in the air. She wrote the word lost and quiet stroke by stroke. Then she flicked her finger. The 2 words flashed in the void for a short moment like lightning, and then disappeared. The next moment, everyone except the 2 of them was silent, as if they had lost their minds in an instant. She let out a sigh of relief and looked at Li Yunxin. She said word by word, the 2 sages haven't ascended yet. It's because they are waiting for it. They are waiting for someone to open it. Chapter 89. After Ling Kongzi said this, Li Yunxin knew that he could not return to the mountain with her. If it was an ordinary treasure, it would be fine. But since the 2 sages were waiting for something related to their ascension, he was not sure what the others would do. But he knew that if it were him, he would not allow the person who knew this secret to live freely in this world. It was not necessary to kill him, but it was something related to ascension. Waited for 1,000 years? Or 2,000 years? The art saint was here 2,000 years ago, and only 1,000 years ago. It's been 1,000 years. No one has been able to open that jade slip after such a long time? Li Yunxin frowned slightly. The art sect existed for 1,000 years, right? The art saint didn't have a successor? Since you've seen the jade slip, you should know what the words inside are like. Ling Kongzi was silent for a while. Her voice suddenly became steady. Of course, someone has seen the jade slip and read the words inside. But the meaning of the words in the jade slip is very deep and obscure. The words themselves are simple talismans used by the ancient sages. Some of us are proficient in these words, but we need more people to work together to study it. So we need you too. It's not a bad thing to go with me. Oh, I see. Li Yunxin raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. He seemed to have a slight headache because of the alcohol and excitement. But in fact, the hairs on his body were already standing on end. He raised his hand to conceal the subtle fluctuations on his face that could be detected by the other party. As if he had suddenly seen a ferocious beast or a venomous snake that was about to pounce on him. A chill suddenly erupted from his bones and instantly spread throughout his body. That sentence just now was not right. Ling Kongzi's current state was not right either. She seemed to have suddenly become a different person. He could not read her tone. If it could be said that Ling Kongzi had been penetrated by him, and his entire inner world was exposed in front of him, then at the moment when they talked about the jade slip of illumination, it was as if an alarm in her heart had been triggered. Her subconscious was instantly armed by some powerful force, forming an unbreakable mental defense. Someone or something in the past had given her an extremely strong psychological suggestion. This strong psychological suggestion established an alarm mechanism in her heart. Once something or someone triggered this alarm, she would become abnormally calm and steady. In that instant, she broke free from Li Yunxin's control over her. However, under such circumstances, Ling Kongzi didn't seem to know. She herself didn't seem to know that the alarm in her subconscious mind had been triggered. She said, "Since you've seen the jade scroll, you should know what the words inside are like." Li Yunxin had seen it before. Therefore, he knew that the words inside were words that everyone in this world could understand. She also said, "Of course, some people have seen it, but they couldn't read it." If someone had seen it, it was impossible that they couldn't read it. What he could see in his current state were some cultivation methods, written in the words of this world. And the art saint set some restrictions on that thing through some kind of spell that only existed in this world. So, he needed to advance to a higher level before he could see some other things. But as far as he knew, there was absolutely no problem of not being able to read it. This meant that neither she nor the someone she mentioned had really opened the jade slip of illumination and read the contents inside. She told a lie that was easy to see through, but once it succeeded, it was a very effective lie. This was because she or they probably believed that no one could know the words that were opened on the jade slip of illumination. So she could make up some nonsense about simple talismans used by ancient sages. Since many masters like Dao Tong and the Grotto Heaven had not seen it, then Li Yunxin should not have seen it either. Li Yunxin should not be able to open the jade slip of illumination. Then, Ling Kongzi was deliberately and casually hinting to him, "Of course, we know how to open this thing. And we have even read it. Whether you can open it or not, whether you can read it or not, we can. And now, we are very happy to accept you as one of us." If it was any other person in this world, they would probably have been tricked. This woman's thinking level right now was simply gone on a rampage. Li Yunxin gently took 2 deep breaths, allowing herself to return to a rational and sharp state. In this Baohua gathering, he had done many things and laid many traps. Now, he was trying to find a way to get out of this dangerous situation as soon as possible, so that he could have a chance to make a long-term plan. After 2 seconds, he put down his hand and raised his head again. He smiled and said, "Okay, I will go with you. In fact, I have already made this plan." He looked at the people in the hall who did not look, hear or move, and pointed at Lu Laodao beside him. "I did so many things today, first for you, and second for him. It's the same with this painting. I think I should show some of my value. Not only am I the owner of the jade slip, but I am also a powerful Taoist painter. Dao Tong and Kenzo need people like me. I am not a pawn that can be sacrificed. But if I leave this Laodao, I have been with him for so long, I like him." Li Yunxin was silent for a while. "You know that I have reached the transcendent state. I need to find my Taoist heart, and I need to go through the tribulation. I am not sure if this Laodao is my Taoist heart or the tribulation. Since someone's Taoist heart is a frog, Of course, it is possible that my Taoist heart is a person. If he can become my Taoist heart, then nothing must happen to him. If he is my tribulation, then nothing must happen to him. You know, if he dies as a tribulation, the tribulation will be even harder to go through. That is why I am doing all these things today, and I will show mercy to these unruly Taoists in the future. I want him to live a better life after I leave. My friend, the ninth young master, has seen this Lao Dao before, and I am afraid that he will harm him. So, from this point of view, I also want to get rid of that dragon son. Ling Kongzi seemed to be smiling. Then why don't you take him with you? The grotto heaven is the paradise in their hearts. You know what kind of people you meet and the high-level cultivators are. Mortals say that cultivators are immortals, but to be honest, after going through so many tribulations, we will feel closer to the demons. He will not like that kind of environment. I don't like being kept in captivity, and he won't like it either. Besides, there is no Chionghua Tower or Munanju there. In fact, this is a siege. The people outside the city want to come in. Once you walk in, you can't control your body, and you can't even think about walking out. Ling Kongzi seemed to be satisfied with his answer. There was a smile in his voice. It is always interesting to hear you talk. Then tell me, the ghost you want me to catch. Why did you catch him? Chapter 90. Dragon Son is looking for him. Li Yunqin looked at Pei Juzi. He didn't know when Ling Kongzi had noticed that something was off with this painter from the capital, but he knew that the possessed painter was already being controlled. Pei Juzi sat upright behind the table, but his eyes showed some panic. He couldn't move. Dragon Son and I call him the ninth young master. After the ninth young master, and I returned to the city of Wei, he disappeared. During that time, something happened near the city of Wei. I thought it was him, but later I thought it was not his method. Some time ago, I walked around the city and asked some people. Some people's relatives lived in the suburbs, and a cow died in their family. After asking about the cause of death, I knew it was not the ninth young master. The ninth young master eats people, but this thing eats souls. At that time, I already had this idea, so I started to investigate the ninth young master. From the annals of the Dragon King Temple, I guessed that he was the ninth son of the dragon, Chiwen. Now you also said that he was the dragon son, so I guessed right. From the annals of the temple, I found that as long as there was a record of abnormal precipitation, there would be people missing. The ninth young master loved to eat people, and he was the dragon son, so I guessed he was the temple's Wei River Dragon King. If he was the Wei River Dragon King, this area would be his territory. I thought he should be a family man. According to his appetite, he only ate about 10 people every year near the city of Wei, which was already very restrained. So now someone was making trouble in his territory. Although it was eating the souls of cows, he couldn't bear it. But later I found out that not only cows, but also many poultry died like that. But as for cows, one cow could change a farmer's life's luck. It was a big animal, so everyone talked about cows. So I guessed that the ninth young master was looking for this thing. Damn it. Just now when he came in, the world was raging. He on the other hand kept looking up at the sky. I could see he was a little pleased with himself. Because the ninth young master should be looking for him in the sky above the city of Wei. But I'm curious. To be able to prevent a great fiendish demon like the ninth young master from finding it, yet we are able to restrain it. But just now, I didn't feel any yin qi at all. So, who the hell are you? He had already turned to that Pei Juezi and asked sincerely and curiously. Ling Kongzi flicked his finger, as if he was undoing some kind of restriction. Thus this Pei Juzi spoke in a human voice. Why have you bound me? As expected, you can speak human language. Li Yunqin praised from the bottom of his heart. I thought he didn't know how to speak human language when he was so quiet, and only the manager spoke. It seems to be a 100-year-old ghost. Ling Kongzi said, it's normal for it to learn human language. They were originally human beings, but after becoming ghosts, they were lucky enough to wander around the world of the living. so they became silly. But if they stay in the world of the living for a long time, they will slowly learn human language. Look at this one. It has at least 200 years of cultivation. Ah, I don't really understand this. In that case, if a ghost lives for a long time, isn't it no different from a human being? Then it will be stronger. Look, it can even use magic. Li Yunxin asked for advice, and Ling Kongzi answered him. Only this ghost stared at him and kept asking, "Why have you bound me?" At this moment, it showed its difference from a human. Ghosts are after all nether spirits. Ling Kongzi answered patiently. The spirit and the body are originally one and inseparable. When the body dies, there will be a ghost. The reason why it is called a ghost instead of a spirit is that the body is the hall of the soul. When the body dies, the spirit will definitely be damaged. Without the hall of worship, it will become a ghost. So a ghost is actually a damaged spirit. Since it is damaged, it can't be repaired. So no matter what, it will always be different from other people. For example, a ghost will always have an obsession. Some things were actually parts of its body that it had lost, and it was difficult to remember them. It could only remember them clearly if they were made up. Listen to this ghost. Is there anyone who still speaks like this? Previously, Li Yunxin only felt that this big ghost's words were strange. Now that he heard Ling Kongzi's words, he realized that it was indeed different from other people. Different from the people of the current era. In Li Yunxin's eyes, the Daqing state was an ancient society with a strict hierarchy, but the atmosphere was actually more open-minded. For example, a girl like Yin Shuero, who came from a relatively well-off family, could show her face on the streets every day, and people didn't find it inappropriate. As for etiquette and speech, compared to the previous dynasty, it was much more vulgar. For example, Lu Laodao didn't really understand the rules of today's Baohua gathering. Although it was called an ancient etiquette, it was actually a secular etiquette that ordinary people in the previous dynasty would follow. As for speech, in the previous dynasty, regardless of gender, everyone addressed him as Lord. The people of the Daqing state mocked the previous dynasty for being pedantic, saying that when two people argued and swore, they still addressed each other as Lord as a ruffian. Which was quite funny. Looking at this big ghost now, he addressed him as Lord. "I need this ghost," Li Yunxin said. "It's not suitable here, I have to bring it back. The ninth young master is looking for it. Maybe it knows something about the ninth young master. No matter what, he used to be my friend. Even if I have to deal with him, I want to be the one to do it. So I want to know more about him." He looked at Ling Kongzi and repeated, "I need this ghost. I hope you can help me. When this is over and I get the jade scroll, I will go back to the mountain with you." Ling Kongzi seemed a little hesitant. Just now, Li Yunxin led the topic to the big ghost and asked her some topics that could effectively make her relax. At this moment, her guard was down again, and the hints that Li Yunxin implanted in her heart gradually gained the upper hand. She tapped the back of her hand twice with her slender fingers, and suddenly asked, "You can make a treasure like the freak-eating painting, which means that your cultivation is about to reach the peak of the transcendent state. I know that Taoist Danqing is not good at fighting, but I feel that something is wrong with your breath. Because I fought with 2 swordsmen from the Lingxiu sword sect. At that time, I didn't have much contact with people from the Daotong and Kinzo sections. The 2 Taoists had powerful talismans on them, and they sealed my ocean of qi and mountain of snow. Until today, I can only use a little nature essence." "You are right," Li Yunxin said honestly. "But why would 2 swordsmen from 2 sects come to my house to look for me? And they are only at the emptiness realm. They said that a Lao Dao said that I have the 10,000 miles of mountains and river painting in my house, and they came for the painting. I believe the words of those 2 idiots, but I don't believe that the person who guided them to me was really for the painting. It was probably just an excuse. According to the 2 swordsmen, the person was on the verge of death, and that's why they found me. So I want to know who is that person." He told the truth about his situation, knowing that it would put Ling Kongzi at ease. This was what the other party wanted to know. He also knew that the other party would have doubts. "In that case, I'll listen to you for now. I'm not afraid of any tricks from you. As long as I bring you up the mountain, everything will no longer be a problem. With this mentality, the other party knew that he was not an idiot. If the other party was confident that she had absolute power to control the final outcome, and if she had a good impression of him, she should not mind some of his little tricks. And she should also know that he was a difficult opponent. As expected, after he said this, Ling Kongzi thought for a while and said, "Oh, I see. I can't tell you about that person for now. As for the things you want to know about this ghost, it's up to you. If you want me to help, just tell me. But as for the time, I hope it won't take more than half a month. I've been out for a long time. It's time to go back to the mountain." "Okay." Ling Kongzi thought for a moment and said, "You're an interesting person, and a smart person as well. But there is one thing. I'd better make it clear. I am a Taoist at the peak of the transcendent state. Previously, the two swordsmen of a lower realm could seal your ocean of qi with a talisman. You should know that the Daotong cultivators have some tricks in the fight. So if I want, within 10 miles of the city of Wei, no one can live. I hope you can make the right decision." Chapter 91. Li Yunxin raised her head without the slightest hesitation and gave a sincere smile. "Okay, I won't do anything stupid." Ling Kongzi looked at him for a while and felt that other than some sort of fanaticism in his eyes, he didn't notice any other abnormalities. Thus, he let out a low sigh and lightly tapped his finger on the table. An invisible force undid the inhibition she put on everyone. However, for these people, the conversation between the two masters only lasted for a short moment. They were ready to listen a moment ago, but in the next moment, they were already sitting opposite each other in silence. There was a final clap of thunder outside the window. Then the rain stopped and the wind stopped. Even the slowest people realized that they were just used by the immortals, but they didn't know what happened between the two immortals. Fairy Ling Kong stood up and said, "This person is no longer a human." She pointed at Pei Juezi. "A ghost with 100 years of cultivation has possessed his body. Pei Juezi's soul has been devoured." Then she turned to Li Yunxin. "This is a Taoist friend of my Langyi cave. There were some misunderstandings before, but they have been cleared up. This ghost will be taken care of by him from now on. But if the steward of the Qin's mansion has any objections, you can ask me." The steward beside Pei Juezi was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that his master had become a possessed ghost. He subconsciously waved his hands. I don't dare." He didn't have the courage and qualification to ask Fairy Ling Kong. "This person, what's your name?" She looked at Lu Laodao again. I'm Hunyuanzi." "Oh, this Taoist Hunyuanzi is a friend of my Langyi cave. He will live in the city of Wei in the future. But don't underestimate him." The ones who had the authority to agree on this matter were the magistrate and the 3 prefectural magistrates. The 3 of them nodded and agreed. They only hoped to end this Baohua gathering as soon as possible and get away from this woman. But what she said next made their hearts tighten. It finally came. "In that case, I said before that I was going to face the killing tribulation, and I have already done so." Ling Kongzi took 2 steps and said unhurriedly, "Many of you know Punnanzi, Ling Su sword sex Punnanzi." Some people knew that he had returned to the mountain gate, but in fact he hadn't. "I killed that person." The hall instantly became silent, and no one made a sound. "As for why I killed him, you should know. You secular people don't think there's anything wrong with killing and eating poultry, but if a domestic fowl kills its own kind, and then gives it to you to eat, I think it will not be happy. Among our Daotong and Kenzo, there are many who were born in the secular world. When the celestial beings passed down the Tao ancestors' heavenly heart dharma, they also said that they had to pity the people of the world and protect the people of the world. Therefore, the first commandment of the Daotong Kenzo is to not take the lives of mortals unjustly. Some scum colluded with the people of the secular world and used their mortal lives to transcend the tribulation. If I see such people, I will kill them. And the few of you here should know what Punnanzi did. I think you even helped him. Fairy, we have our difficulties. Seeing that things had reached this point, the magistrate no longer cared about his face and cried out in grief. The magistrate's cry made the three magistrates kneel on the ground and kowtow. Xianqingzi's situation was even worse. He was originally sitting with his eyes fixed on the ground, but now his body softened and he collapsed. Difficulties? Then tell me. The magistrate was startled and hurriedly said, Fairy, please understand. Although the Ling Su sword sect is not a big sect in your eyes, in the eyes of the secular world, it is a real celestial sect. Our Daqing state also has a law that says that when celestial sects do things in the secular world, local officials have no right to interfere. This is the rule on the surface, but when it comes to the local areas, they can only be more cautious. The celestial masters are aloof, and their temperaments are different from us mortals. If they have a request, who dares to disobey? You are saying that the Ling Su sword sect forced you to do this. The magistrate was startled for a moment, and sweat appeared on his forehead. As a fourth-level official, how could he not know the meaning behind these words? He might be involved in the internal strife of the celestial sections. Oh, you think you are involved in the internal strife of the celestial sects? But at this moment, Ling Kongzi actually said what the magistrate was thinking. The magistrate was even more startled. If it wasn't so, then what was the reason? Was it really just because the Ling Su sword sect killed the secular people? Fairy Ling Kong killed her fellow cultivators. However, Ling Kongzi only smiled coldly and ignored him. He pointed at the 4 officials and the 3 painters. The 7 of you surrender in 3 days. You, as the magistrate, will interrogate them, and then interrogate yourselves. Since you are secular people, you will be dealt with according to the laws of the Qing kingdom. If you dare to be biased, I will deal with you according to the rules of the celestial sections. After saying these few words, the rain outside the building had actually stopped. Ling Kongzi stood in the middle of the field and slightly raised his head to look at the sky for a while. He then said to Li Yunxin, In 3 days, I will go see you. This scroll, it was drawn for you, so it is yours. Okay. She took a step and walked out of the building with just 1 step. Thus, everyone was looking at him. Li Yunxin stood up from behind the table and stretched his arms a few times. As soon as he turned his head around, he saw that the prefectural magistrate, as well as the painters, were still staring at him. He made a fuss and called out, If I were you, I would run to the yamen right now and work hard, study hard, and live hard. Because, do you know how she kills people when she is angry? Have you seen sticky and thick rice spilled all over the ground? If you replace that thing with a bloody paste. Okay, don't look at me like that. I definitely won't plead for you, and I won't think of a solution for you, much less help you. Because right now, I am in a hurry to do something else, to talk to these fellow cultivators about something serious. To be reasonable, in fact, I am more difficult to deal with than that Ling Kongzi. I will not be lenient in killing people. Get lost. I haven't even eaten yet. After a quarter of an hour, only Li Yunxin and those wild Taoists were left on the 2nd floor of the Qianghua building. They had originally ordered delicious food, but now, all of them were served. But it was not a table, but a table for 8 people, just like the wedding ceremony of the Daqing state. There were many people like Lu Laodao who had been hungry all day and only hoped for this meal. But at this moment, they were not in the mood to eat the food. Since they realized that Li Yunxin probably had an extraordinary identity, they were guessing why he asked them to stay. When all the dishes were served, Li Yunxin stood up and smiled. I know you are all hungry, so I will make it short. Chapter 92. All of you are temple attendant and temple master. You must have worshipped a god. But I don't need to tell you. Most of them are not real gods, and whether they have Reiki. Look, the situation of the religious circles around the city of Wei is that your family worships the Dragon King. My family worships the Old Lord, and his family worships the Mountain God. The people of Wang Village are used to worshipping the Mountain God, and the people of Niujia Village like to worship the Dragon King. In fact, they are all asking for the same thing. But when the people of Wang village went to Wuxia village, they accidentally sprained their ankle and wanted to pray for a speedy recovery. Oh, is this the Dragon King in your family? What if the mountain god doesn't like it? This will cause a loss, right? So, my friends, it is necessary for us to change to a more professional way of management. What do you mean by more professional? It means to use the same brand and expand the scale. All the religious circles around the city of Wei should unite and worship one god. In this way, you are the same god in Wang village and the same god in Wuxia village. Both families will benefit, and the future will be wonderful. Go on. The only person who dared to interrupt him at this time was Shirqueezy. She was sitting at the same table with Lu Laodao, and they had a private conversation just now. She didn't know what Lu Daoist said to her to make her feel at ease. Now, when everyone was listening to Li Yunxin with a lot to say, she asked a question. Yunxinzi, fellow Taoist. She stood up and made a Taoist salute seriously. I can understand a little bit of what you said, but most of our temples and Taoist temples have been around for a long time. After a long time, maybe several generations of people around here are worshipping the same temple. Even according to what you said, if we change the god's position, the nearby believers. Okay. This is indeed a problem. Li Yunxin pressed her hand down. After thinking for a while, he sighed. But my friends, think about another problem. There are immortals in the world. 2 saints after all. Not to mention the 2 sages. Even the profound realm and true realm Qi warriors are more powerful than these mountain spirits. And then there's Black Bai Yanjun. He's a real deity. Why don't you worship them? Because it's useless. Li Yunxin spread his hands and tilted his head. Worshipping the twin sages? It's not like the twin sages will run over to help them find the lost chicken. Bai Yanjun, your life will still be taken. That's why people who are too aloof and unapproachable will have this problem. Then you can go and worship those mountain spirits and wild monsters. Although they might not grant you everything you ask of them, they will occasionally do something for you that will make you popular. So in fact, we simple and lovely villagers are very sincere pragmatists. Of course, I can understand. Who has the energy to talk about philosophy when they don't even have enough to eat? So, you don't have to worry that they won't worship just because they change their deity position. Even if you change it to a Gunera Black Demon Immortal and say that it's not a temple, but a Demon Immortal castle, as long as they come in, they will feel comfortable. Occasionally, they will hear someone say that the Black Demon Immortal's spirit has manifested. After a long time, when you want them to worship, they will obediently do as you say. Cough, fellow Taoist Yunxinzi, this Black Demon Immortal. Don't mind these details. It's the primordial deity. It's not surprising that you haven't heard of it. Li Yunxin said quickly. So, I already have a pilot unit here. Fellow Taoist Yun Yuanzi's Dragon King Temple. It was originally a statue of the Dragon King of the Wei River, but we replaced it with a statue of Crown Prince Jiawen and a statue of a dragon lady. On the first day, the response from the villagers was very good. Right, how much did we earn last month? It's not even a month yet. But as of now, the revenue from incense offerings is 3 taels of silver. It's the previous 2 months. Lu Laodao answered obediently. Li Yunxin spread his hands. So my friends, look, we've gained both fame and fortune. I know what you're worried about, but the deity position that I personally painted for you is indeed filled with spiritual energy. Not only is it filled with spiritual energy, it also calms the heart. Once our Wei City's religious community reaches a consensus to worship these 2 deities, we'll change from extensive production to intensive production. Isn't that great? The wild Taoists looked at each other, but no one spoke first. In fact, they all knew Li Yunxin's means. The paintings that he made should be fought over crazily. But now, he seemed to have some grudges with that Ling Kong fairy. Although this Taoist Yunxinzi looked young and promising, and also had a strong background. But since it was a fight between 2 tigers, they, as nobodies, didn't have the guts to get involved. Li Yunxin sighed. Think about it, my friends. I'm a reasonable person. I'm also thinking for the sake of our Wei City's religious community. Seeing that his tone had softened, a Taoist said tentatively, Fellow Taoist, alas, in fact, we're already flattering you by calling you fellow Taoist. But to tell you the truth, your current situation, alas, we're thinking that this matter isn't urgent. We'll wait until the matter between you and Ling Kong is settled. When he said this, many people finally showed a look of agreement. I see. Li Yunxin lowered his head and rubbed his hands, but quickly raised them again with a smile on his face. Then I can understand. For example, maybe we've pissed off Fairy Ling Kong by using his stuff, because high-level cultivators are temperamental in the first place, right? The Taoist nodded hurriedly. Yes, that's right. But the problem is, I'm also a high-level cultivator in the transcendent state, my friends. He spread his hands helplessly. I'm standing here, and I'm telling you with a smile, come and join us. You say sorry, buddy, but your future is uncertain, and we don't want to. I also feel embarrassed. Aren't you afraid that I'm temperamental? He said this with a smile, and then no one said anything else. The lobby suddenly became cold. Ling Kongzi didn't smile, and people couldn't see her expression, so the mystery in her heart increased. But the first impression of Li Yunxin was the strongest. At first he was the Taoist boy of Lu Laodao, and he was gentle and polite. But now, they could still see his expression, hear his tone, and his temperament was like a normal person. Compared to the cultivators of the intent realm and the emptiness realm, he was more like a normal person. Therefore, the reverence they had for him was reduced by a lot because of his witty words just now. At that time, when Li Yunxin said these words, they would wake up as if waking up from a dream and realize, maybe, he also had a temper. So at this time, they saw Li Yunxin put away his smile and draw something in the air with his finger. The body of Pei Juzi, who had been bound and sitting in the corner of the hall and unable to move, was like a sack that had been emptied, softly deflating. A gust of black gas struggled and roared in the air as it was pulled out from the 7 orifices of the body, and then it was put into Li Yunxin's sleeve. He didn't move during the whole process, and only stared at everyone present with his eyes. That voice, they all heard it. It was extremely sad. A chill slowly crept up everyone's spine. That's why I have a temper too. For example, I was angry just now, but you are the old man's friends, so I vented my anger on him. I pulled the ghost out of the skin. This experience is almost the same as skinning. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and then a smile appeared on his face again. So now, do we have a consensus? What I mean is, to replace those things that you've been offering. No one said anything. Li Yunxin raised his wine cup and said happily, Good. Then friends, let's toast to our friendship? After a few breaths of silence, the wild Taoists finally raised their wine cups. Chapter 93. They drank a cup of wine, and then put it down in silence. Li Yunxin looked at them and sighed sadly. All right. You guys are not happy here. Then I'll go. Old Lu, keep them company. I'm going home. After he finished speaking, he turned around and slowly walked down the stairs. After he left for a quarter of an hour, the wild Taoists looked at each other. They couldn't believe it was over. Lu Laodao smiled awkwardly. In fact, well, Brother Xian is a very kind person. Because of this, they continued to look at each other. It was already nightfall. Although the rain had stopped, it was still around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. In his previous world, this was the best time to indulge in pleasure. But in the city of Wei, it was the right time to be sound asleep. Therefore, the bluestone street that had been washed by the storm was shining under the moonlight, but there was no one around. The green trees and flowers on both sides of the street emitted a rich and fresh fragrance because of the water vapor. He stood on the street and took a deep breath. He felt that he was soaked in the sweet smell. It made him feel comfortable and painful. In fact, since the first day he hung the portrait in the temple, he had never experienced the feeling of no pain. The pain tormented him at every moment, causing his mood to worsen. Li Yunxin knew that this slow and irresistible change would eventually bring more problems. For example, the previous arrangement was not very delicate. The pain affected his thinking. But fortunately, both Lu Ling and the ninth young master had obvious weaknesses, and he could play with their emotions and minds. But he couldn't expect everyone he met to be like this. Lu Ling was already an exception. A cultivator at the peak of the transcendent state should not have such an obvious personality flaw. But she did. He could only understand that a genius must have a flaw, and a perfect person could not exist. So he needed to solve this problem. Playing with his mind couldn't solve everything. At least for people like the two sages, who could step into the state of Taishang Wangqing at any time. They wouldn't give him a chance to break their mental defense. What's more, he also realized that there was someone who had forcefully interfered with Lu Ling's mind. Perhaps it was something else, or perhaps it was a person. If it was a person, it was a very frightening person, as dangerous as he was. He had to make himself truly strong. At the very least, he had reached the peak of the transcendent state, and passed the delusion tribulation. This tribulation had obviously affected him. His spiritual power had become quite unstable, and his thoughts had become more impulsive. He paced on the wet street, pondering, and experiencing the pain he felt when he injected the power of faith into his snow mountain and ocean of qi. He slowly walked through an alley, and saw that most of the houses had already turned off their lights. Occasionally, there were a few households that did not turn off their lights. If one listened carefully, one could hear the sound of people reading. He even saw a shop that had just closed for the day, and the shop assistant was installing the door planks. When she saw him, she paused for a moment and then smiled at him. He smiled at the waiter and asked, "Do you have anything to eat?" His appearance and temperament were infectious. For some reason, the waiter had a good impression of him. He thought for a moment and said, "Yes, but they're all cold now." Li Yunxin tossed a piece of silver to the waiter and said, "Don't worry about it." The waiter happily took it, thanked Chun Fan, and went into the shop. After a while he came out with 2 oil paper bags. In one bag were 2 corn pancakes, and in the other bag were some coleslaw and some shredded chicken. Li Yunxin took them, and put the coleslaw and the chicken in the pancake. He took a bite and thought it tasted good. He had eaten at noon, and it was about 9 o'clock now. He was already starving. The waiter looked at him and asked curiously, "What are you eating?" "Hamburgers," Li Yunxin said. "I don't think you don't have Rujiamo here. Haven't you seen it before?" "No, I haven't." "All right." He smiled and walked forward. The waiter said behind him, "The steward of the Lu family just came to buy some stuff. He should still be on his way. You might run into him." Li Yunxin paused for a second and turned around to ask, "Ha?" The waiter looked at him, blinked, and pointed ahead. "Aren't you a Taoist priest from the Lu family?" Li Yunxin turned around and looked in the direction he was pointing. After thinking for a while, he understood. He smiled and thanked him, then turned around and continued walking. The place the waiter was pointing to should be the Lu family. There were lights in that direction. Judging from the brightness, it should be a big house with candles. Listening carefully, there was music. Of course, it was morning music. Someone had died in that house. He was wearing a Taoist robe and walking alone on the street at this time. The waiter probably thought he was a Taoist priest performing religious rites in the Lu family. The custom of the Qing kingdom was to fast at night when a family held a funeral. The waiter probably thought he couldn't take it anymore. So he kindly reminded him that the steward of the Lu family might be up ahead. So he didn't want to be seen stealing food. Li Yunxin pondered for a moment. In the end, she felt that a dead person was inauspicious, so she decided to take a detour. There was a big locust tree in front of him. The locust flowers had bloomed, and their fragrance was intoxicating. It had rained earlier, and a lot of the locust flowers had fallen. Now that they were steamed, the smell was even stronger. To the left of the locust tree was another fork. Li Yunxin walked to the side of the locust tree and stopped. Then he made a sound of surprise and stared at the locust tree. Someone, or something that looked like a person. He walked out of the tree trunk. He first poked his head out, and a scarlet tongue hung from the side of his mouth. Then his 2 hands reached out and grabbed the tree trunk. With a push, his body came out as well. Finally, he stepped out and stood still. Li Yunxin looked for a while and laughed involuntarily. It is said that locust trees are mean and unlucky. So that's what it is. You came out from here. Mr. Bai, this is the second time we meet. The person who came out was Bai Yanjun. Bai Yanjun, whose face was as white as his clothes, heard these words and immediately widened his eyes. He stared straight at Li Yunxin. If I guess correctly, the 2 of you must have a division of labor. You are in charge of taking in the good guys, and the Black King of Hell is in charge of taking in the bad guys. Li Yunxin said with a smile. The person who died in the Lu family is not bad, right? That's why you are here? Bai Yanjun still stared at him and did not speak. When Li Yunxin finished speaking, he said in a shrill voice, You can see me? Ha! Li Yunxin frowned. Is this strange? Or can I only see you in my dreams? I'm not dreaming, am I? Bai Yanjun did not speak anymore. He walked over slowly and reached out his hand to Li Yunxin. His hand was also pale, but his fingernails looked neat. Li Yunxin did not dodge. At first, he found it interesting when he saw the King of Hell come out from the old locust tree that was said to be unlucky. Then, he remembered what the 2 had said previously and decided to take this opportunity to ask again. Was he surprised or not? Was he afraid? Who would not be afraid when seeing this thing that had always existed in legends? But Li Yunxin knew how to be an interesting person. It was as if he could see this Bai Yanjun, as if he was looking at a ghost. It was quite an amazing thing. And now, this Bai Yanjun also wanted to see what was happening. It did not seem to be malicious. Chapter 94. Therefore Li Yunxin did not hide. Being cautious was a good thing. But if he was so cautious that he did not take any risks, it would be called cowardice. Bai Yanjun's hand, it pierced into Li Yunxin's body without any hindrance. He wanted to dodge immediately, but he forced himself to stand there, because he had an inexplicable favorable impression of Black Bai Yanjun. Most of the time, inexplicable favorable impression and sixth sense were actually the effects of the subconscious. They were not groundless. For example, when a person went out alone, he inexplicably felt that something good would happen that day. Therefore, when he arrived at the company and was notified of his promotion, he would think, Oh my God, sixth sense. I have good luck somehow. But in fact, before this, he might have already known that there would be a personnel change in the company, or a boss might have praised him, or a colleague who was proficient in insider information might have shown goodwill to him. His subjective consciousness did not summarize these things, but at the subconscious level, he had connected these clues. Therefore, when he went out, he had already expected this result. People called it sixth sense. Li Yunxin did not know why he had a favorable impression of Bai Yanjun, and why he trusted him. But he knew that such a subtle but obvious favorable impression should be the result of subconscious analysis that he was not aware of. His premonition had always been accurate, so he let the hand penetrate his body. He felt a burst of heat, but it only lasted for a moment, and Bai Yanjun withdrew his hand and screamed, You little brat, do you know that you don't have long to live? If someone else said this, Li Yunxin would only smile faintly. But now, the Yama king who was in charge of life and death said. Li Yunxin immediately frowned. What do you mean? Bai Yanjun stared at him, a pair of pure black eyes like 2 bottomless pits. In a moment of desperation, he stuck out his tongue to make himself speak more fluently. You little brat, you really don't know the pros and cons. How do you think you can see me? Although I don't know where your soul came from. You reincarnated into a human body. Since you are a human body, why don't you cultivate the spiritual power of heaven? Now, you are being worshipped by the masses. How can the power of faith be obtained by a human like you? Your snow mountain and ocean of qi are already riddled with holes. You're not far from death. Li Yunxin's expression changed slightly. He composed himself and said, I do know about this matter. But what if I slowly replace the spiritual power in my body with the power of will, and reconstruct my snow mountain and ocean of qi? In the future, I won't practice the heavenly heart technique anymore. I'll switch to practicing the divine path. Is that not allowed? TSK, you are really a newborn calf. You think no one has thought of this before? Bai Yanjun's voice became sharper and sharper. It's possible. However, a human body could not use the power of hope. Your ocean of qi and mountain of snow is like a house with stone walls. And the power of vow is like scattered sand. Now that your house is sealed, you can slowly exchange the loose sand for the stone. This big house won't collapse in a short time. You can also use your spiritual power to undo some of the seals. But in the future, when you receive a lot of the power of wishes, how can scattered sand support a big house? You are not a spiritual monster or a mythical beast. Did no one teach you this common sense of cultivation? Li Yunxin was speechless. He stood quietly under the tree and thought for a while. Then he sighed helplessly. No one taught me. They are all fucking professors. Who would teach me that 1 + 1 = 2? Then what if I don't absorb the power of hope now? Your foundation has been destroyed by yourself. It will be like this for the rest of your life. F***ck. Li Yunxin touched his forehead. This is 2F** king big. Then, do you have any ideas? You are experienced and knowledgeable. Can you give me some advice? Bai Yanjun stared at him and sized him up again. TSK, you little kid. It's fine if you are not afraid of me, but you still want to take advantage of me. There is a way. Li Yunxin smiled in her heart and finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was blackmail by Yanjun. He was not some random monster who controlled the life and death of the whole world. How could such an existence have the time to care about someone's life and death? If Bai Yanjun said so much because he saw him out of curiosity, it would be as funny as the president of his era who saw a man who was owed his salary and followed him to ask for it. Because we have met before. Li Yunxin was in a better mood. Last time, you didn't accept the souls that died because of me. You also mentioned a senior. After these days, I think, that senior, is he the art saint? After he finished speaking, he took another bite of the cake. Bai Yanjun gasped. You little kid, you still have the mood to eat cakes. How dare you? Li Yunxin spread his hands. What else can I do? Isn't it all up to you to decide? In fact, I am quite curious. What happened to the previous one? Why didn't you accept me? Doesn't this mean that even if I accidentally die, I don't have to be afraid? Heh, Bai Yanjun sneered. If you die, even if I don't accept you, you will still be a wild ghost that has lost your mind. What's the use? Oh, Li Yunxin thought for a moment. All right. Fine, then I am unlucky. After saying this, he continued to walk forward with the biscuit in his hand. After 3 or 4 steps, he heard Bai Yanjun shout, You little kid, aren't you afraid of death? Everyone has to die. It may be as heavy as Mount Tai, or as light as a goose feather. Li Yunxin said vaguely while chewing, I just accepted a big ghost today. It has cultivated for hundreds of years, and I feel that it is living a good life. Since there is no other way, if I die, you won't accept me. Then I will muddle along for hundreds of years and become a ghost king. At that time, if I show my face, everyone will be afraid of me. Won't I be able to cultivate godhood and receive the power of wishes? What's there to be afraid of? The White Hell Lord, who was busy every day, would not tell him so much for no reason. Li Yunxin knew that he must have something to ask of him. This request seemed to have a condition that must be fulfilled, and that was, he must not die. This Bai Yanjun was a little silly. If he was the one doing this, the other party would definitely be filled with gratitude, and at the same time, make a lot of promises. But not like now. In a flash, the White Hell Lord had blocked his path. This confirmed Li Yunxin's guess. The first time they met, Black Bai Yanjun said that he would not accept his soul, nor the souls of the people around him. He was afraid that the devil who killed the Sun Luo temple would cause more trouble. And Li Yunxin knew that to Black Bai Yanjun, the only difference between him and everyone else in this world was, his situation was very similar to that art saint. If that was the case, the devil they were talking about was most likely art saint. That senior was awesome. He actually brought him to the nether world. Li Yunxin stopped in his tracks. Huh, you are a scheming kid. Bai Yanjun said angrily. But don't think that I don't have a way to deal with you. It's just that I don't want to be distracted recently, and I don't want to trouble myself, so I won't bother with you. I know this, Li Yunxin said. So, since you stopped me again, do you have any ideas? Chapter 95. Bai Yanjun let out an inexplicable sharp laugh, as if it had found a way to vent its anger. I have a way. It squinted at Li Yunxin. Do you dare to die? Li Yunxin's expression remained the same. And then I won't take your soul. You can take over my body. It sounds like a trap. Li Yunxin said calmly. I know several situations of taking over a body, but the most optimistic one is Qiao Jiesin. Her body becomes an immortal skin, but she also loses the 5 senses of a human. Not to mention rebuilding the snow mountain and ocean of Qi. Bai Yanjun laughed again, its voice full of malice. Why be a human? You can accept being a ghost. But can't you accept being a big animal? Li Yunxin sighed. Grandpa, I know I was wrong. Let's talk nicely. What's the matter? Bai Yanjun laughed again. You are indeed a big animal. Think about Dragon's son. His real body is as big as a hill. Isn't it a big animal? You, Li Yunxin frowned slightly. Take over Dragon's son's body? I can only take over the bodies of those things. Bai Yanjun touched its tongue. Those so-called divine beasts, Humph. Dragon, Golden Wing Daping, Dragon Son, or Kirin. TSK. In my eyes, they are just big animals. You should know that they are originally. When it said this, it seemed to feel that it had said something wrong, so it hurriedly stopped talking. Li Yunxin keenly noticed that this Bai Yanjun, the master of life and death of all things in the world, when it mentioned those divine beasts, that it called big animals, its mood was not right. It was probably the kind of hee-hee, you just have some stinky money, what's the big deal? Now your husband still has a mistress, a slightly sour taste. If it experienced this, it didn't seem to be a bad choice. But why? Li Yunxin asked humbly. What's the difference between snatching their bodies and snatching a monkey's? Where are they? Bai Yanjun smiled disdainfully. Everything in the world has a spirit. They were humans, after all. Their bodies and souls were one. Without either, they would be incomplete and would suffer damage. Because of this, after seizing someone's body, they will lose their 5 senses and only have an empty body. As for those beasts that have yet to develop intelligence, how can they possibly contain such a delicate thing like a human soul? Huh. Li Yunxin frowned. That dragon Qilin and Rock. Weren't they originally beasts as well? What do you know? This could not be said. I don't want to tell you either. Bai Yanjun rubbed his tongue impatiently. You only need to know that when a person dies, only his shell remains. But when those big animals die, they have to leave an empty space. Leave an empty space? Li Yunxin couldn't understand what he meant. What empty space? Yamajun was unhappy again. He frowned. You're such a troublemaker. Empty is empty. If other things in this world are dead, they're dead. But this big animal died. Although its body is gone, there's still an empty space. It needs your soul to make up for the empty space. Hey, you'll know when the time comes. Hearing what it said, Li Yunxin pondered for a moment, and understood. He didn't know whether this Bai Yanjun didn't want to say it like that, or this world didn't have such a saying. Li Yunxin felt that the empty space in its mouth, if he replaced it with a word he could understand, was actually godhood. This so-called big animal seemed to be hiding a secret. Thinking of this, he felt more at ease. He respectfully saluted this Bai Yanjun. Jun Shang, please continue to teach me how to do it. So you're so useful to me. Then I'll immediately kneel to you. Transformation seemed to make Bai Yanjun a little surprised. But after a moment of astonishment, she let out a shrill laugh. You little brat. You're really a wonderful person. You're really similar to the Devil King. Ha ha ha. Then I'll teach you, listen carefully, I'll only say it once. If something happens to you at that time, even I won't be able to save you. He spoke quickly and his voice was sharp. But Li Yunxin was smart and remembered it after only one time. But after remembering it, He deliberately asked a few more questions. That Yama Jun seemed to be impatient, and only used words like "think about it yourself" to dismiss him. Seeing that he couldn't get any more information, Li Yunqin flicked his sleeves and asked the ghost in the sleeve. Unexpectedly, this Bai Yanjun also knew about it. It waved its hand. "Why do you make things difficult for this thing? This thing is more than 200 years old. It has been in the city of Wei for more than 460 years. It usually doesn't do evil. Although it devours souls, it only devours the souls of birds and beasts. It never hurts people. You said it killed livestock a few days ago? That's because it ate all the big birds and beasts near the city of Wei. So it went to devour livestock. You said that dragon son wants it? Ha ha ha. That dragon son is like a beast living here. He only thinks that the city of Wei is his nest. Such a century-old ghost devouring birds and beasts. Of course he wants it. But this thing has some ability. It has been hiding for 300 or 400 years. And the two of them play around like this every few days. Haha, interesting. Why don't I keep this big ghost? Hehe. This monarch, can't I find some fun? It's fun, so I keep it for fun. Li Yunqin slightly raised his eyebrows. This Yama Jun seems to be saying something insincerely. But he didn't ask more, and only said, "But recently it killed people." Bai Yanjun rolled his eyes. "In more than 400 years, there will always be some deaths. My lord seems to be hiding something." Li Yunqin also knew the inclination of its attitude. Then the last question. Since this big ghost was captured by Dragon Sun in the city of Wei, and ate all the birds and beasts nearby, why didn't it leave? Why are you so noisy? Bai Yanjun raised his eyebrows. Li Yunqin could hear that it was really impatient. Why do you care about it? When you have enough fun, just let it go. Don't harm it. After saying this, it seemed to be afraid that Li Yunqin would not let it go, and disappeared in a flash. Only Li Yunqin was left standing at the entrance of the alley. After standing for a while, he slowly walked 2 steps to the wall. Then he slowly leaned his back against the wall and raised his head. Just like that, he silently looked at the sky for a very long time. The night sky above him had just gone through the baptism of wind and rain. There were no dark clouds, and the galaxy was shining. Li Yunqin looked at the almost colorful Milky Way, the familiar Big Dipper, and the silver plate-like moon, and let out a long sigh. The night sky of this world was almost the same as that of his previous world. It was almost, because at dawn every day, he could not see the morning star, never. At dusk, he could not see the Chang'e star, never. The morning star and the Chang'e star were Venus. This was a world where everything was very familiar, but there was always a trace of strangeness in the details. He wanted to take over. Fuck you. Li Yunqin exhaled again, pushed his palm against the wall, and bounced up. He straightened his back, and continued to stride forward. Chapter 96. When Lu Laodao returned home, he saw Brother Xian staring blankly at a bronze mirror. A bronze mirror was a rare item for Lu Laodao. As a man, he didn't need to dress up, so he naturally didn't need such an item. Moreover, it was a bronze mirror. The one Brother Xian was looking at wasn't the size of a palm, but the size of a pot. Such a large item must be worth a fortune. Lao Dao had now learned to pay attention to small details like Brother Xian, and he noticed that there was some fine white powder in the engraving of the bronze mirror. He immediately knew that it wasn't new, and there was no place to buy it at this time. Ah, it's so late, and Brother Xian has borrowed this bronze mirror from some girl. Ah, Brother Xian. Lao Dao had drunk a little tonight, but he had restrained himself, so he was only a little more excited than usual. But he had just seen Brother Xian stir up a lot of trouble, and he was also hiding something in his heart. Thus he became a little quiet. After watching him for a while, he picked up a stool by the door and sat down. He glanced at Li Yunqin from time to time as he picked up the fur balls on his sleeves. After picking up the sleeves, he picked up the ones on his collar. But Li Yunqin just stared blankly at the mirror, ignoring him. Lao Dao sighed in his heart, feeling a little sleepy, so he quietly got up and planned to return to his room. That was when he suddenly heard Li Yunqin mutter as if to himself. Am I very handsome? Lao Dao was stunned for a moment, but he understood what handsome meant. Just like how Brother Xian usually said so cool and so handsome. He knew that it meant he was expressing his approval. So he said, yes, Brother Xian is very handsome. Li Yunqin sighed faintly. Yes, I think so too. That's why a handsome, humorous, understanding, and promising young man like me can't die young. I'm only 14. Can I use the word die? TSK. How could Brother Xian say that? Like most people in this era, Lu Laodao hurriedly spat a few times. How can you say that? Li Yunqin only smiled and looked at himself in the bronze mirror. After pondering for a while, Lao Dao sat down again and said in a low voice, Brother Xian, Lao Dao, I don't have much ability. You've been taking care of me these days. Lao Dao, I don't know what you said to the fairy from the Langia Grotto heaven, and what your plans are. But if it's something bad, Brother Xian, don't worry. Will we be able to overcome this tribulation? Li Yunqin didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he was silent for a while before he suddenly asked, Old Lu. Say for example, you are a temple attendant. Now a person comes to ask you how to do carpentry. He asks you how to use wood to make a big bird that can fly in the sky. But, you tell him about it. And you even give him a detailed plan on how to saw the wood, how to make the mechanism, and how to put it together. What does this mean? Whenever Li Yunqin spoke, Lu Laodao had always been very attentive. Although he didn't know what this question entailed, he felt that he could help Brother Xian with the details. Thus he began to ponder. After thinking carefully for a while, he tried to speak. Logically speaking, I'm a temple attendant. How would I know anything about carpentry, let alone mechanisms? But if I tell you everything, then this method is definitely not what I want. Perhaps someone told me about this method, or perhaps I've seen someone do it before. Brother Xian, is this right? Of course it is. Li Yunqin looked at himself in the copper mirror and muttered to himself, it's the leader of hell. How would it have the leisure to study that? The spiritual energy in the painting is so clear that it's almost as though it's a grand master. But when I ask it a few more basic questions, it can't answer any of them. It'd be a miracle if it was the one who came up with this method. He stared at himself for a while longer, and then suddenly smiled. It was a genuine smile, almost as though all of his previous melancholy had been swept away, and he had finally figured out the crux of the matter. Awesome. He stood up from the mirror and stretched lazily. No wonder the twin sages are so awesome. But I've never heard of them causing such a ruckus in the Azura temple. So is this the reason why that person is so excited? Huh. Men really have to be more ruthless with themselves. Lu Laodao didn't know what Li Yunqin had figured out to make him so happy. That said, he always liked this side of Li Yunqin. He was always confident, as though he could solve any problem. Thus, he also felt that his mood had improved. Now that he was in a better mood, he tried to ask about something else. Brother Xian, there's something else. It's about my fellow Taoists. Them. I know what you want to ask. Li Yunqin paced around the room briskly, and his tone became cheerful again. You're such a good person. Are you really afraid that they'll get into trouble because of my paintings? Haha. You people still have to learn one more thing. The painting is the most rugged, and the Sangtai is the one who takes the clothes. He waved his hand strangely. I'm here as an expert to impart some experience to you. The example might be a little inappropriate, but it's not crude at all. For example, you old Lu. You had a dispute with Qiao Duanhong of the Qiao clan, and there's a grudge between you and them. Let's first exclude the fact that you're a pervert or a mental patient, and just say that you're a normal person. Would you go and find the stray dogs one by one just because Qiao Duanhong fed them by the roadside, and beat them all to death? Lu Laodao opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say that he wouldn't, but he couldn't open his mouth. Li Yunqin spread out his hands. Like I said, the example is inappropriate. I'm not scolding you. Besides, heaven and earth are heartless and treat all living things as straw dogs. There's actually no difference between humans and dogs. I'm just saying, can you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Lu Laodao nodded. Then where are they? Have they gone back to their own homes? They found an inn in the city and booked it. Lu Laodao sighed. They're all waiting for you, Brother Xian. Look at you sighing again. Do you think I'm too overbearing? Sigh. Li Yunqin laughed and walked out of the door with his hands behind his back. The moonlight in the courtyard was like water, and the shadows of the bamboos were dancing. He opened his hands. Look, what a beautiful scene. I could have lived a leisurely and carefree life in this small villa. But there are so many idiots who make me restless. That ninth young master must be crazy. He said I'm interesting, and wanted to visit me often. Who the F***CK wants to see me? That Ling Kongzi is a madman as well. He also said I'm interesting, and wanted to bring me back to the mountain. I'm F***king scared of being cut into pieces. There's also a retard. Let's not talk about him. He doesn't look like a good person. Oh, actually, he's not a human. You see, I'm just a place of the outer fringe, a fortress. I could have gone anywhere in the world. But because of my poor background, they all came looking for me. Now I'm hiding, but I'm still being found. It's because they're awesome. Doubtong Kenzo, they're amazing. I'm weak and powerless. That's why I'm not happy now. If I'm not happy, people will die. Li Yunqin turned around and looked at Lu Laodao. Just watch. In a few days, these idiots, all of them will die. Not a single one will be left alive. Chapter 97. His oath made Lu Laodao speechless. The old man looked at him standing in the moonlight, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. Brother Xian's situation was not right at all. He did not doubt that this mysterious master, named Li Yunqin, could do what he said. Li Yunqin had given him enough surprises. But he felt that Li Yunqin's words were too tragic and resolute. So much so that Laodao felt a little worried. He always felt that a person like Brother Xian would not stay by his side forever. One day, when the wind and clouds gather, he will transform into a dragon and leave. He sighed in his heart. He spent the night like this. The next day, when the sky turned white, Lu Laodao looked into Li Yunqin's room. Brother Xian seemed to have stayed up all night drawing. He knew that Li Yunqin did not give him the paintings of the temples out of kindness. He must have his own plans. But after thinking about it for a night, he felt that what Li Yunqin said was right. Even if he had his own plans, it was still a good thing for the temples. The paintings of the prince and the dragon lady were still there in the front yard, and there were still people coming to worship them. They all said that it had the effect of calming the mind, and some people even offered 100 taels of silver for it. Brother Xian was in the transcendent state. Lu Laodao could not help but exclaim. He had heard of Taoist priests and swordsmen in the transcendent state, but who had ever heard of a painter in the transcendent state? After a while, Li Yunqin pushed the door open and walked out, with a roll of paper under his arm. Laodao also hurried out. Brother Xian, what are you doing today? He always felt that he was involved in a big event. This made him very nervous and worried, but he also felt a sense of excitement that he had not felt for many years. Li Yunqin handed him a roll of paper. It's all here. 37 copies. You go and divide it up for them, and frame it for offering when you get home. You know what they do? Just tell him that I'll go for a checkup in a few days. Forget it. If he wasn't an idiot, he would know what to do upon seeing this painting. Well, when you're done, tell them to hurry back. I'm going out for a stroll. When Lu Laodao heard this, he suddenly felt his hands become heavy. Those were the 37 idols. Nearly 4,000 taels of silver. He immediately felt a little unsteady on his feet. However, he still stopped him. Brother Xian, what are your plans? Do you want to tell me? Laodao, I'm afraid that I'll ruin your plans. Li Yunqin smiled and seemed to want to say something. But in the end, he only recited 2 lines of a poem. I don't know the true face of Mount Lu, only because I am in this mountain. Have you heard of this poem? When Laodao heard this, he only felt that it was good, but he couldn't understand the meaning of it. He could only shake his head. Brother Xian, your poem. It's not my poem. It's a poem I copied. He patted Lu Laodao's arm hard and pointed at the paintings. Settle this matter. Please. Although he said it casually, Lu Laodao could hear the seriousness in his words. He nodded seriously. Don't worry. The two went out together. Lao Dao went to the inn where the Taoists were temporarily staying, while Li Yunqin went out of the city. He put a simple talisman on himself, so that he walked like a gust of wind, fast, but not so fast that it would attract attention. It took him an hour to get out of the city of Wei. He estimated that it was only 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Once out of the city, the scenery was totally different. Looking to the east, there was a mountain range that stretched like a dragon, and looking to the west, there was a vast expanse of flat land. A smooth official road went straight to the north. If you followed this official road, you would eventually arrive at the capital of the kingdom of Qing, Jinghua. But Li Yunqin traveled with some ox carts, horse carriages, and hawkers carrying vegetables for a while, and then turned into another road. Although this road was not as orderly as the official road, there was a row of lush trees on both sides. Behind the trees was an irrigation ditch, and then large tracts of fertile land. There were few people on this road, except for a peasant woman, who held a basket of goose eggs tightly in her arms. She vigilantly watched him for a while, and then turned into another small road. So he was left alone, and walked for another hour. The trees on both sides gradually thinned, and the field of vision gradually widened. There was a slight smell of water in the air, and there was no longer only the sound of birds and insects, but more background sounds. After walking for a while, he could finally hear the sound of rushing water. At the end of the road was a ferry. There were 2 or 3 small boats moored there. Seeing Li Yunqin coming from afar, one of the boatmen asked in a loud voice if he wanted to cross the river. Li Yunqin looked and shook his head, so they went back to chatting, ignoring him. He got off the road and walked along the river. There were thick reeds growing by the river, and there was no river bank. He didn't know how deep the Wei River was, but it was very wide. There should have been a dock on the other side of the ferry, but even with Li Yunqin's eyesight, he couldn't see it clearly. It was hidden in the mist. If he said it was a big river, even if he said it was a big lake, people would still believe it. Li Yunqin was a little absent-minded by the wide water surface. She also saw many huge whirlpools on the surface of the water, and the waves brought by the rapid water flow. Who knew how many monsters were hiding under the water surface? He took a few more steps, and walked up to a small hill covered with green grass by the river. He stood there and looked at it carefully for a while. As far as he knew, the Qing kingdom was landlocked. There were many dynasties in this world. The Qing kingdom wasn't the largest, but it wasn't the smallest either. Since the Qing kingdom was landlocked, then this part wouldn't be the estuary of the Wei River, but the middle reaches. If the middle reaches of a big river could have such a scene, who knew how majestic the lower reaches of the Wei River would be? The sound of water surged in his ears, and his body was covered in mist. Looking at the water and sky merging into one, with no end in sight, he let out a long breath after a while. No wonder. There were people who wanted to fight for the world. When sitting in the study, the word world was only a broad concept. You could imagine mountains and rivers, but in your imagination, you were like a giant looking down on them. They were shrunk in your consciousness. But now, seeing this scene with his own eyes, just seeing this river made him feel majestic. This entire world must be majestic and extraordinary. If adding this thought, this Wei River will be mine. I will soon become the master of this vast and majestic Wei River. The Wei River Dragon King. Li Yunqin held his breath and stared at the extremely wide surface of the water for a quarter of an hour before finally exhaling. It seems that thinking like this makes me feel much better. All right, my friend, it's time for us to meet. So he took out a piece of paper from his sleeve. With a flick of his finger, the paper turned to ash. The shadow of the 9th young master appeared out of thin air, standing where he was and staring straight at him. Li Yunqin patiently looked at him for a while, and the shadow gradually blurred and disappeared. He sat down on the carpet like grass, and amidst the sound of the wind and waves, he softly hummed a song. The grassland that witnessed the death of the gods is a field of wildflowers far away. The wind is farther away. Chapter 98. Li Yunxin finished humming a song, but the ninth young master hadn't arrived yet. He stood up and used another portrait. Just like before, this portrait contained bits of the ninth young master's aura. In fact, if the ninth young master worshipped this portrait, he would also absorb the power of faith. After using the second portrait, he sat down again and continued to hum. Just like this time, all the way until noon. He used 9 of them in total. The sun moved to the top of his head. The sky was blue and beautiful without a single cloud. The sunlight steamed the leaves and grass, and his cotton robe was also dry and warm. Beads of sweat even began to seep out of his body. But he didn't try to stretch his body. Instead, he wrapped himself up. After a quarter of an hour, his brow began to perspire. He had not had anything to drink or eat for the whole night, and the whole morning, so he looked a little disheveled at the moment. He rubbed his eyes and took out the 10th portrait. After the green light of this portrait dissipated, Li Yunxin heard footsteps behind him, and a familiar voice. "Why are you so anxious to call me? Are you in a hurry to die?" It wasn't a friendly tone. It seemed that the person who spoke was quite unhappy, but Li Yunxin heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and a smile appeared on his face. Then he suddenly turned around. The smile on his face suddenly disappeared, replaced by a panicked and anxious expression. "Ninth young master, something bad has happened." Seeing his expression, the ninth young master's originally hostile face slightly froze. After a moment, a cruel and strange smile appeared, and a row of sharp teeth appeared. "Then tell me, why is something bad, ah?" When he said this, the teeth in his mouth slowly grew longer. By the time he uttered the word, "ah," in a long rhetorical tone, his grin had almost reached his ears, and the white teeth in his mouth had already turned into fangs. Such a mouthful of teeth appeared on the body of a handsome man, and under the bright sun. It was strange and terrifying. His demeanor and tone made it seem as if he was filled with anger, and was about to denounce Li Yunxin, but found that Li Yunxin's reaction was completely unexpected. Therefore, his anger was held back because of this abnormality, but he held it in for the time being, and in a most dangerous manner. He intended to listen to what the man before him had to say. Once there was a disagreement, it would explode out twice as fast. Li Yunxin wiped his sweat, and didn't care about his attitude. He quickly pointed at the Wei River and said, "You should leave now." There was no time to explain. "Someone wants your life. I've been waiting here to talk to you about this. I thought you couldn't come. I have plenty of time." The ninth young master's eyes gradually turned pale yellow. His pupils became thinner and thinner. Li Yunxin knew that this was a sign of extreme anger. But he still didn't care. "If you treat me as a friend, then hurry up and leave. Do you know that I don't have long to live? Do you want me to die for nothing?" He took a deep breath, and said before the ninth young master's pupils turned into thin lines, "I've asked someone to change all your god positions around the city of Wei. Although I don't know if it's effective or not, but she's found out." As soon as he said this, it was as if time had stopped, and the gears were stuck. The ninth young master's extremely angry expression froze on his face. Then his eyes suddenly softened, and he became a normal person again. What? You asked someone to do this? You did this on purpose?" Li Yunxin blinked his eyes in surprise. You know about this?" The ninth young master didn't say anything. His eyes rolled around in his eye sockets. After a while he said gloomily, "Then tell me, why did you do this?" "I know your Wei River Dragon King," Li Yunxin shouted excitedly. "That day when he came to find me, I thought about it, and felt that there must be a reason. I checked the temple records and the breath in the Sanhika Dragon King temple. Then I knew that your Wei River Dragon King, the god position in Lu Laodao's temple, was yours. In order to break the seal on my body, I changed your god position for mine, so that I could enjoy the power of incense and wish. Then I knew." Li Yunxin clenched his teeth and looked straight at the ninth young master, as if he was trying hard to suppress his emotions. "Then I knew this. You really treat me as a friend." As soon as he said this, the ninth young master's handsome face leaned back slightly, but soon leaned forward again. It was as if the strong and turbulent emotions expressed by Li Yunxin were like violent waves, shocking and unbearable to him. But in a flash he realized, That was the emotion he had been longing for. The sense of security of being cared for, without any cost, exchange, or sacrifice. The ninth young master was Qi, the ninth son of the dragon. Last night, Li Yunxin asked the big ghost in detail. The big ghost had been alive for more than 460 years, and it had been hiding with the ninth young master for so long. In the city of Wei, it was the one who knew Dragon Sun best. In the Qianghua building, Li Yunxin knew that the ninth young master was looking for the big ghost, so he asked Lu Ling to help him get it. He only thought that since the ninth young master was looking for him, he might have something that his good friend valued. Maybe he could make use of it. But what he learned from the big ghost last night was far beyond his imagination. Although the big ghost was not as logical and clear-minded as ordinary people, it was different from the departed soul like Qiao Jiesin. Li Yunxin only asked him for 2 hours, and he understood a lot of things. The ninth young master, he was not favored. There was a Shinryu in this world. There was only one Shinryu. This Shinryu was a mythical beast that ruled the world of water creatures, and even demons. It was almost equivalent to the emperor of the demon world. But the emperor of Shinryu was not bestowed by anyone. It got it by itself. It was said that when the Shinryu was born, there were many powerful demons in the world, but they were all subdued by the Shinryu. Then the nobles of the demon world surrendered to the dragon, which gave it supreme authority. Since the world was peaceful, the Shinryu went into hiding. After hiding, it was bestowed with 9 sons. They were Qiunyou, Hatred, Chaofeng, Paleo, Lao, Baxia, His Majesty Fu Wu, and Qiwen. These 9 sons were in charge of 70% of the water in the world. Although this kind of control was not absolute, it was more like a lord in name. But no matter what, the world was huge. According to Li Yunxin's estimation, the territory of the Daqing state was about 1/3 of the country he was in before. But this kind of territory was only a medium empire among the many dynasties. To the north of the Qing kingdom, across the Yi kingdom, was the super ruler of the known world, Li. The territory of the Li kingdom was about 10 times the size of the Qing kingdom, and the emperor of the Li kingdom called himself the Sky Emperor. Chapter 99. In such a big world, there were many rivers. 70% of the water belonged to Jiuzi Qiwen. There was only one Wei River, and it was only in name. After leaving the Qing kingdom, the river basin was not something he could control. The big ghost didn't know why it was like this, but it was not important. Li Yunxin already knew why the ninth young master was like this. The ninth young master was like this. The jealousy, the loneliness, the moodiness, and the strong desire to be recognized were all there was in him. This was practically a textbook example of a patient with serious chronic psychological trauma because of childhood, family, and difficulties he encountered when he was young. Thus, after Li Yunxin said this, the ninth young master's anger immediately disappeared. Li Yunxin breathed a second sigh of relief in his heart. Although demons didn't have much humanity, they were still intelligent and logical creatures. Even if their logic was different from that of humans, and had its own system, it was still considered logic, and it was still in his hand. The banished Long Sun, after hearing Li Yunxin's words, stood by the surging Wei River, as if trying hard to make himself look more ferocious. In the end, he was confused by the things that suddenly filled his heart. After a few breaths, he finally said fiercely, "If so, why did you do this?" At this moment, Li Yunxin no longer looked panicked. He straightened his body, took a deep breath, and said word by word, "Ninth young master, have you heard of this story?" The king of Tianfang Kingdom had a guest named Pianli. This retainer had served 3 countries in succession, but all of them had been destroyed. Therefore, Pianli came to Tianfang Kingdom. Later, Tianfang Kingdom was also destroyed. The guest ran away as usual. After a few years, the king of Yitan Kingdom, who destroyed Tianfang Kingdom and killed the king, was assassinated when he was crossing a bridge. But he was safe, and the assassin was caught. The king of Yitan Kingdom asked him why he wanted to assassinate him. This assassin said that he was the retainer of the former Tianfang Kingdom's monarch Bianli. During these years, He cut his face with a knife and disfigured his face. He swallowed the hot coal again to destroy his voice. After waiting for so long, I finally got this chance. Li Yunqing paused and wiped the sweat off his face, giving him time to think. The expression on Dragon Sun's face had become quite complicated. This was the first time that Li Yunqing had seen him show such emotions that were similar to those of a normal human being. He frowned and asked, "Why didn't you escape this time?" This piece says that when he was serving the monarchs all treated him as a servant. But when he followed the king of Tianfang Kingdom, the king treated him as a kingdom scholar. Therefore, Li Yunqing straightened his body, his expression solemn and dignified. Amidst the rushing waves of the Wei River, he said, "Your Majesty treats me as a scholar of the state, and I repay you as a scholar of the state. You saved me once in that temple. You saved me again in Qinghe County. To you it was as easy as lifting a finger. But to me it was the grace of a new life. Previously, I didn't know the trick and used the power of faith to break the seal. I had already broken the taboo of cultivation and could no longer advance. Since that's the case, I will repay you with my life. That woman knew that I was your friend, so she threatened me and asked me to help her kill you. How can I be an ungrateful person? I told that woman that you are the Wei River Dragon King and enjoy the power of faith. Once you get rid of all the temples that worship you, you will lose the faith of many believers, and your strength will be greatly reduced. At that time, we can kill you." That woman didn't believe me. Hehe, I naturally have a way to make her believe. Li Yunqing smiled sadly. To replace the statue of a god with a portrait, I need some spiritual energy. Only then will the temple attendant and the temple master feel that it is a real god and willingly change it. So I told her, if she doesn't believe me, I will be the one who is worshipped. I am a human. If I receive the power of faith, I will die. I don't even want my own life. Naturally, she believed me. Li Yunqing shook his head. She asked me why I did that. I said that when I was with you, I had killed a lot of people. If your death is related to me, I will have no face to live in this world. After saying this, Li Yunqing started to take deep breaths. His chest was moving up and down violently. It seemed that his emotions were surging, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. The ninth young master stood in front of him and listened to him in a daze. After listening to him, he was stunned for a few seconds and suddenly became furious. He waved his hand and hit Li Yunqing a few feet away. His face suddenly became ferocious, and he shouted angrily, "Idiot! Idiot! Idiot! I found you interesting in vain. I am the Wei River Dragon King. The Wei River Dragon King. How dare you act like this? Idiot! What an idiot!" He was like a child, jumping in anger on the spot, but he didn't attack Li Yunqing anymore. After he shouted for a quarter of an hour, he suddenly fell to the ground and looked at Li Yunqing, who had sat up from the grass. He stared at him for a while and suddenly sighed, "You man, why didn't you tell me earlier?" The power of that angry strike was very strong. However, Li Yunqing was wearing the soft armor that he gave him, so he only felt a little sweetness in his throat. Looking at his furious look, he knew that he was expressing his feelings. He didn't know how long the dragons lived, and he also didn't know how long the demons could live before they could be considered as adults. But looking at the ninth young master, he knew he was still a child. At least mentally he was still a child. He didn't know how to express his feelings, and he didn't know how to control his feelings. He was happy because he got his first real friendship, but this happiness soon turned into depression because of the bad news. Li Yunqing didn't even need to use much strength. He had completely controlled his emotions. Looking at him like this, even Li Yunqing suddenly felt a little pity in his heart. This dragon's son, at least at this moment, really treated him as a friend? Because he couldn't bear it, he even started to think maybe he could change to another method. However, when the ninth young master said the next sentence, this little bit of soft feelings and fantasy completely disappeared in Li Yunqing's heart. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" The ninth young master's voice had slowly calmed down. "I found the place where you released the ghost." "You released the ghost, didn't you?" "Humph. I have been looking for it." In the end, it was still found by this young master. That ghost said you borrowed the bronze mirror from that family Humph. I was angry at you at that time. I saw the girl's skin was soft and tender, so I grabbed her and ate her. Now I know what happened, Humph. The ninth young master frowned. I wouldn't have eaten it if I had known. Actually, the taste wasn't that good. But she's just a human after all. He seemed to be a little ashamed. But this little bit of shame quickly disappeared like the dew under the scorching sun. Sigh. Since it's like this, you have to die, huh? I have no other way. Pity you, Sigh. Then tell me, what did you say to that woman? Li Yunxin's expression didn't change at all. Even his eyelids didn't tremble. He looked at the ninth young master calmly. The woman you mentioned, is she from the Yin family? A young girl, called Yin Shuero? Maybe. The ninth young master frowned, as if he had more patience because of Li Yunxin's sacrifice. Who has the patience to remember her name? She's just a blood sacrifice. If you like it, I'll sacrifice a few more for you after you die. Oh. Li Yunxin smiled slightly. He lowered his head, remained silent for a while, and then spoke again. But his voice had become clear and organized. So it's like this. I told that woman, I'll pretend to be your friend and stand on your side. When you two fight, I'll take advantage of you and put a talisman to seal your cultivation temporarily. At that time, you'll be at my mercy. But at that time, Li Yunxin enunciated clearly, his eyes clear and cold, staring straight at Long Sun in front of him. I'll use this talisman on her. The ninth young master frowned slightly and thought for a while. He looked at Li Yunxin again, his eyes rolling. Then he tilted his head slightly. It's that simple? No matter what kind of strategy, the simpler and more effective it is, the better. Li Yunxin looked at him and answered. If there are too many links and variables in a strategy, it's easy to go wrong and lose the game. So, it's really that simple. I'll decide the winner. The ninth young master thought for a while, and suddenly showed a troubled expression. That woman. Did you say she's a Taoist? A Taoist in the transcendent state. She said she's here to kill Long Sun. Umph. If I happen to be busy that day, You have nowhere to go, my friend. Li Yunxin interrupted him, and for the first time, said in a tough and serious tone. You have nowhere to hide, my friend. This way river, isn't it yours? Where else can it be? The ninth young master suddenly opened his eyes wide. How dare you talk to me like this? But Li Yunxin only sighed. I'm a dying man. His words made Long Sun calm down again. He frowned angrily, paced a few steps and said angrily, I'm Wei River Dragon King. As soon as he finished speaking, a cloud rose from the ground and rolled him into the river. Li Yunxin turned around and stared at the direction where he entered the river for a while. Then he raised his head, faced the sun, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath from his nostrils. Demons, ah! I just caught them and ate them. Such a simple sentence was uttered in such a simple manner. Li Yunxin knew that if she had any soft thoughts, she would be seeking her own death. Maybe one day, this sentence would come true for him. Being friends with an orange didn't mean that he wouldn't eat oranges. When eating oranges, did he need to think about the feelings of the orange? He sighed again, stuck another talisman on himself, and walked towards the city. This matter was over. The ninth young master wanted to hide, but he knew he couldn't. Without Wei River, what was he? He could only accept the challenge. Lu Ling would probably be curious about what he did outside the city. She, Lu Ling, was in the transcendent state. Although Li Yunxin's ocean of qi and mountain of snow was sealed, he was also in the transcendent state. Since that was the case, she wouldn't be so stupid to try to spy on him. So since he had already repaid his life, she would go back and lure him into a trap. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.